My stepdaughter took my wife and her biological father to meet her fiancé's wealthy family, leaving me behind. You were never my father, she told me. I just whispered, okay. But the next morning they burst into my apartment demanding answers, and when her billionaire fiancé saw me sitting in my old armchair, he turned pale. He looked at me, then back at my stepdaughter and said one sentence that left everyone frozen. Before I tell you what he said, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you believe respect is earned, not owed. My name is Reginald King, but everyone from the docks in Oakland to the distribution centers in Atlanta just calls me Reggie. I am 75 years old. I am a black man who lived through the era of segregation, who built a trucking empire from a single rusted Ford pickup, and who learned that the only thing heavier than a fully loaded 18-wheeler is a heart full of betrayal. For the last 10 years, I have lived quietly in a penthouse apartment that looks modest on the inside because I kept the old furniture I bought in the 80s. I wear denim jackets. I drink black coffee. I don't wear watches that cost more than a house. I let people assume what they want. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the phone rang. The screen said, Brittany, my stepdaughter. The girl I had taken in when she was 6 years old with pigtails and a missing front tooth. The girl whose biological father, Darius, had disappeared into the state penitentiary system, leaving her and her mother, Coretta, with nothing but debts and bruises. I picked up the phone expecting the usual, a request for money, a complaint about her job, a bill that needed paying. Hello, Brittany, I said, my voice raspy from a nap I had just taken. Reggie, are you home? She asked. Her voice was tight, fast, nervous. It was the tone she used when she was plotting something. I am home, I said. I was just looking at the news. Listen, she said, cutting me off. Tonight is the dinner. The introduction dinner with Liam's parents, the Sterlings. I sat up straighter in my recliner. I knew about the dinner. Liam Sterling was a good kid from a family that owned half the commercial real estate in the tri-state area. Brittany had been obsessing over this meeting for months. She wanted everything to be perfect. She wanted to prove she belonged in their world. I know, I said, reaching for my cane to stand up. I have my navy blue suit ready. I just need to polish my shoes. What time should I be ready? There was a silence on the other end of the line, a cold, heavy silence that lasted 5 seconds but felt like 5 years. I heard her take a deep breath. You are not going, Reggie. I froze. My hand hovered over the remote control. I thought I had misheard her. Excuse me, I asked. You are not going, she repeated louder this time. This dinner is for parents. Real parents. Darius is in town. He is going to take me. I felt a phantom punch to my gut. Darius. The man who hadn't paid a dime of child support in 20 years. The man who had sent her a birthday card maybe twice in her entire life. The man who I had bailed out of jail 3 times just so Brittany wouldn't cry. Darius. I said, my voice low and dangerous. Darius is going to meet the Sterlings. Yes, Brittany said, and I could hear the defiance in her voice. He is my father, Reggie. He has the charm. He knows how to talk to people. He looks the part. You know how you are. You get quiet. You wear those old clothes. You tell stories about driving trucks. It is embarrassing. Embarrassing. The word hung in the air. I looked around my living room. I looked at the degree on the wall that I had paid for. NYU, $200,000. I looked at the keys to the Mercedes on the counter, $80,000. I looked at the medical bills on my desk from when she broke her leg skiing in Aspen. All paid, all by the embarrassment. I paid for that dress you are going to wear tonight, I said. I paid for the teeth in your mouth. I paid for the roof over your head. That is what you do, Reggie, she snapped. You pay. That is your role. You are the provider. You are the wallet. But Darius is my dad. He has the blood. And tonight I need my dad. I need someone who fits in with the Sterlings. They are elite, Reggie. They are high society. You are just a retired driver. I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't just a driver. I wanted to tell her that King Logistics moved 40% of the freight on the eastern seaboard before I sold it. I wanted to tell her that Mr. Sterling and I had done business in the 90s. But I stopped myself. If I told her now, it would look like I was begging for her respect. And at 75 years old, I do not beg. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice deadly calm. You are taking the man who abandoned you to meet your future in-laws, and you are leaving the man who raised you at home because I am not good enough for your image. It is not about being good enough, she sighed as if she were explaining quantum physics to a toddler. It is about optics. Darius looks like a gentleman. He looks like he has old money. You look like you work with your hands. I do work with my hands, I said. That is how I paid for your life. Whatever, she said dismissively. Just don't come. Don't show up. Don't call. Liam thinks Darius is a business consultant. We are going with that story. Don't ruin this for me, Reggie. Just stay in your apartment and watch your TV. You are good at that. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't say I love you. She just clicked off. The line went dead. I stood there in the middle of my living room holding the phone. The silence of the apartment was deafening. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear the traffic 10 stories down. But mostly I could hear the sound of my own heart breaking, not into jagged pieces but into dust. It wasn't the first time she had been disrespectful. There were the eye rolls at Thanksgiving, the snide comments about my truck driver friends, the way she introduced me to her friends as her stepdad, never just dad. But this was a surgical excision. She had cut me out of the most important night of her life with the precision of a butcher. She chose the image over the substance. She chose the lie over the truth. I walked over to the mantel above the fireplace. There was a framed photo there. It was taken on her graduation day. I was wearing my best suit, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. She was wearing her cap and gown, holding her diploma. I had my arm around her. I remembered that day. I remembered writing the check for her student loans so she could graduate debt-free. I remembered her hugging me and saying, "Thanks, Reggie." Not "Thanks, Dad." Just "Thanks, Reggie." I looked at the photo. I looked at my own smiling face. I looked at a man who was a fool, a man who thought he could buy love with loyalty, a man who thought that if he just gave enough, if he just stayed steady enough, eventually he would be accepted. I was wrong. I picked up the frame. The glass was cool to the touch. I looked at her smile. It looked like Coretta's smile. A smile that wanted things. A smile that consumed. I didn't throw it. I didn't smash it. That is what a weak man would do, a man who cannot control his emotions. I am Reginald King. I have negotiated contracts with unions. I have stared down gangsters who wanted to hijack my cargo. I do not throw tantrums. I simply turned the frame around. I placed it back on the mantel, face down. The cardboard backing stared at me. Gray. Blank. Empty. That was it. That was the moment the switch flipped. For 20 years the money flowed one way, from my accounts to their hands, from my sweat to their luxury. I had justified it as duty. A man takes care of his family, a man provides, but they had just told me I wasn't family. They had defined the terms. Brittany said I was just a wallet. Okay, I can accept that, but wallets open and wallets close. I walked to my desk. I sat down in my leather chair. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I logged into my bank's portal. I saw the joint accounts. I saw the credit cards. I saw the supplementary cards issuing to Coretta and Brittany, the Platinum Amex, the Black Card, the gas cards. I saw the transactions from today. $500 at a salon, $300 at a shoe store, $1,200 at a men's suit shop. Darius. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. They were using my money to dress him up. They were using my money to buy the costume for the man who was replacing me. They were dressing a wolf in sheep's clothing and billing the sheep. I picked up my cell phone. I dialed the number on the back of my card. "Concierge service, how may I help you?" "Mr. King," a polite voice answered. "Hello, Sarah," I said. "I need to report some activity." "Of course, sir. What is the issue?" "I seem to have misplaced my cards," I said. "All of them. The supplementaries, too. I think they might have been compromised. I need you to freeze everything immediately. Mark them as stolen. Everything, sir. Even the cards currently in use, especially those I said. I want a total lockdown. Decline everything. If someone tries to buy a pack of gum, I want it declined." "Done, sir. The blocks are active as of this second. Would you like us to send new cards?" "No, Sarah," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Not yet. I will let you know when I need new cards. For now, let's just let the system do its work. Thank you, Mr. King." Is there anything else? No, that will be all. I hung up. I looked at the computer screen. The status indicators next to the cards turned from green to red. Blocked, blocked, blocked. I closed the laptop. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of iced tea. I sat by the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there in a fancy restaurant, my wife and my stepdaughter were sitting down with the Sterlings. Darius was probably pouring wine and telling lies about his business ventures. They were laughing. They were clinking glasses. They were celebrating their deception. They thought the old truck driver was sitting at home crying. They thought I was hurt. I took a sip of tea. I wasn't hurt. Not anymore. The hurt was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. I checked my watch. 7:30. The appetizers would be arriving. They would be ordering the expensive wine to impress the billionaires. They would be feeling on top of the world. Wait until the check comes, I whispered to the empty room. I didn't turn on the TV. I sat in the dark and waited. I knew the phone would ring eventually. I knew the storm was coming. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was the one controlling the weather. I am Reginald King. I built an empire on asphalt and diesel. I know how to navigate a difficult road. And my family was about to find out that when you cut the brakes on a truck going downhill, you don't get to complain about the crash. The sun went down. The city lights came up. The photo on the mantle remained face down. And I sat in the dark, smiling, because tomorrow morning was going to be very interesting. The scent of Chanel No. 5 arrived before she did. It was a thick, expensive cloud that used to signal a celebration, but tonight it just smelled like a bill I had already paid. Coretta swept into the living room like she was walking a Paris runway. She was wearing the emerald green silk gown I had bought for our 20th anniversary last month. $4,000. It shimmered under the recessed lighting, clinging to curves that hadn't changed much in 20 years, curves I used to worship. Tonight, looking at her, all I felt was a cold draft in my chest. She stopped in front of me, adjusting a diamond earring. Another gift. Another payment. She looked me up and down, her eyes landing on my faded flannel shirt and my worn work boots. It wasn't a look of disgust exactly. It was worse. It was pity. The kind of pity you give a stray dog right before you kick it off the porch. "Reggie," she said, her voice smooth as polished glass. "Brittany told you the plan, right?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had taken out of a cramping apartment in the projects and put in a penthouse with a view of the skyline. I looked at the woman whose debts I had cleared, whose tears I had wiped, whose daughter I had raised as my own flesh and blood. She told me. I said, my voice steady, betraying nothing of the storm inside. She told me I'm not invited. She told me Darius is taking my place. Coretta sighed a long, dramatic exhale designed to make me feel like I was the unreasonable one. She walked over and patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. Her nails were freshly manicured. Gel tips. $80 plus tip. My money. "Baby, don't be like that," she cooed. "You know how these things are. The Sterlings are different. They are old money. They judge." "And I don't fit the picture?" I asked. She smiled a tight little smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You are a diamond in the rough, Reggie. You always have been. But tonight Brittany needs a polished gem. Darius? Well, Darius has that way about him. He can talk about art and wine. He can blend in. You know you get uncomfortable in those tuxedos. You get grumpy when the food portions are small. We are just trying to spare you the stress." "Spare me," I repeated flatly. "You are sparing me." "Yes," she said, checking her reflection in the hall mirror one last time. "Besides, you are getting older. You need your rest. The doctor said your blood pressure was up last week. Why sit through a 4-hour dinner when you can stay here, relax, watch the game, and order a pizza? It is for the best." For the best. That was the phrase people always used when they were about to screw you over. It meant best for me and too bad for you. "Darius is broke, Coretta," I said quietly. "He is driving my car. He is wearing a suit I probably paid for indirectly. How is he going to blend in with billionaires? He has charisma." She snapped her mask, slipping for a split second. "Something you wouldn't understand. It is not always about the bank balance, Reggie. It is about the vibe. And right now your vibe is tired, old man. So just be a good husband. Stay here and let Brittany have her moment. Don't make this about you." She turned on her heel, the expensive silk swishing softly. She grabbed her clutch purse from the entry table, the one with the platinum card inside, the card linked to my primary account. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder. We might go for drinks afterwards. I didn't answer. I listened to her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. The sound of my assets walking out the door. I heard the front door open. I heard Brittany's voice in the hallway, excited, nervous. I heard Darius's deep, booming laugh. The laugh of a man who had never worked a hard day in his life but always managed to land on his feet, usually on someone else's dime. I walked to the window. I pulled back the curtain just an inch. Down on the street, the valet was pulling up the car. My car. The S-Class Mercedes. Black, shiny, pristine. I had bought it cash 2 years ago. I kept it waxed. I kept the leather conditioned. I watched Darius slide into the driver's seat like he held the title. I saw him adjust the mirror. I saw Coretta and Brittany get into the back like royalty. They pulled away, merging into the city traffic, heading toward the kind of restaurant where a salad cost $30. They were gone. The apartment was silent again, but it wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the heavy anticipatory silence of a courtroom before the verdict is read. I turned away from the window. I walked into my office. It was the one room in the house Coretta didn't touch. It smelled of old paper and leather. It smelled like work. I sat down at my desk. It was a heavy oak desk scarred from years of use. I opened my laptop. The fan whirred to life. I typed in my password. It was long and complex. Coretta always complained that I was too paranoid about security. She didn't understand. When you build an empire from asphalt and diesel fumes, you learn to lock the gates. The banking portal loaded. The numbers filled the screen. They thought I was just the bill payer. They thought I was the old man who wrote checks and forgot about them. They thought I was a resource, a well that would never run dry. They forgot that before I was a husband, before I was a stepfather, I was a businessman. I was the CEO of King Logistics. I knew where every penny went. I knew the cost of fuel to the cent. I knew the depreciation rate of every tire on every truck in my fleet. Did they really think I didn't track my own household expenses? I clicked on the Cards tab. There they were, a list of plastic leeches sucking the life out of my accounts. Coretta King, Platinum Supplementary, Status Active. Brittany King, Gold Supplementary, Status Active. Brittany King, Student Expense Card, Status Active. Emergency Gas Card, Darius Jones, Authorized User, Status Active. I stared at that last one. Coretta had begged me to add him last month. He needs help getting to job interviews, Reggie, she had said. Be a Christian. I had been a Christian. I had turned the other cheek so many times my neck was stiff. I clicked on the transaction history for today. The numbers scrolled by. The dress, the shoes, the salon, the suit shop, a cash advance of $500 from an ATM near Darius's motel. They were partying on my grave while I was still breathing. I looked at the total available credit. It was high. I had excellent credit. I had never missed a payment in 50 years. But credit is a privilege, not a right. My mouse hovered over Coretta's card. You are tired, she had said. You need your rest. She was right. I was tired. I was tired of being used. I clicked the small gear icon next to her card. A menu dropped down. Report lost, stolen. Freeze card. Cancel card. I chose report lost, stolen. It was more immediate. It triggered a fraud alert. It meant that if someone tried to use it, the terminal wouldn't just say declined. It would say pick up card or call bank. It would embarrass them. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to report this card as stolen? This action is irreversible. I didn't hesitate. I clicked yes. The status light turned red. Card blocked. I moved to Brittany's card, the gold card, the one she used for her networking lunches and her image consulting clothes. You were never my father, she had said. If I wasn't her father, then she wasn't my dependent. Click. Report lost. Stolen. Yes. Red light. Card blocked. Then the student expense card. The one linked to the trust fund I had set up. The trust fund that was supposed to be a surprise for her wedding. $250,000 sitting in a growth fund waiting for her to start her life. I wasn't just the custodian of that fund. I was the sole trustee. The terms were clear. The funds were to be used for educational or advancement purposes at the discretion of the trustee. Funding a dinner where I was disrespected was not educational. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was going to be the most educational dinner of her life. I opened the trust fund portal. It was a separate window. I navigated to the disbursement settings. Monthly allowance $3,000. I highlighted the number, I hit backspace, I typed 0, save changes. Then I went to the beneficiary status. Active. I changed it to suspended, pending review. I wasn't stealing it, I wasn't being criminal, I was just exercising my rights as the trustee. I was reviewing the account, indefinitely. Finally the gas card, the one Darius was using. I didn't just freeze it, I canceled it entirely. I sat back in my chair. The screen was a sea of red indicators. It looked like a dashboard warning of engine failure. But to me, it looked like safety. It looked like the brakes engaging just before the cliff. I looked at the clock, 7:45. They would be at the restaurant now. They would be seated. The waiter would be handing them the wine list, the leather-bound heavy wine list. Darius would be scanning the reds, looking for the most expensive Cabernet to show Mr. Sterling that he was a man of taste. He would order. The waiter would bow. The sommelier would bring the bottle. They would taste it. They would laugh. And then the appetizers would come. And the main course. Steaks, lobster, truffles. They would eat their fill. They would toast to the future. A future funded by the invisible man sitting in his old denim jacket 10 miles away. And then the bill would come. I imagined the moment. The little black folder placed on the table. Darius reaching for it with a casual arrogance. Coretta smiling her fake society smile. Brittany looking at Liam expecting him to be impressed by her father's generosity. Darius would reach into his pocket. He would pull out the card. My card. The one Coretta had slipped him. He would place it in the folder. The waiter would walk away. And then, the walk back. The waiter returning. The whisper. The second try. The decline. I took a sip of my cold coffee. It tasted bitter but good. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned off, leaving something harder underneath. Something like steel. I wasn't just an old man. I was the bank. And the bank was closed. The restaurant was called Le Ciel, and it sat on the 45th floor of the city's most exclusive tower. It was the kind of place where the napkins were made of Egyptian cotton, and the silence was heavy with the weight of old money. The walls were lined with velvet, and the view of the city lights below was breathtaking, a glittering carpet of diamonds that seemed to stretch on forever. But the most interesting show wasn't outside the windows. It was happening at the round table in the center of the room where my family was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Darius sat at the head of the table, leaning back in the chair with an arrogance that he hadn't earned. He was wearing my Italian suit, the charcoal gray one I kept for funerals and weddings. It was a size too big for him in the shoulders, but he didn't seem to notice. He held a crystal glass of whiskey in one hand, gesturing broadly as he spoke to Mr. Sterling. "You know how it is," Richard Darius said, using Mr. Sterling's first name with a familiarity that made Liam flinch. "The market is volatile right now. That is why I moved my assets into offshore developments. Real estate in the Caymans. High risk, but high reward. That is the game we play, right?" Mr. Sterling sat opposite him. He was a man of few words with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of hustle in the book. He didn't lean back. He sat upright, his posture perfect, his hands folded on the table. He was listening, but he wasn't buying. "Interesting," Mr. Sterling said, his voice dry. "I wasn't aware there was much development land left in the Caymans. My firm looked into it last year and the zoning laws were quite restrictive. How did you manage to bypass the environmental regulations?" Darius froze for a fraction of a second. His eyes darted to Coretta, who was sitting to his right, looking like she was trying to hold her breath and smile at the same time. "Well, you know," Darius stammered, taking a large gulp of whiskey. "It is all about who you know. Connections. I have people. Good people. We handle the red tape." Coretta let out a high, nervous laugh. "Oh, Darius is so modest," she chimed in, placing a hand on his arm. "He never likes to bore people with the technical details. He is a big-picture man, just like you, Mr. Sterling." Mrs. Sterling, who was wearing a string of pearls that probably cost more than Darius's entire life earnings, took a small sip of water. She looked at Coretta with a gaze that was polite but freezing. "And you, Coretta?" she asked. "What occupies your time? Brittany tells us you are involved in philanthropy." It was a trap. Brittany had clearly lied to build up her mother's image. Coretta didn't do philanthropy, unless shopping at Saks Fifth Avenue counted as charity. "Oh yes," Coretta lied smoothly. "I work with underprivileged youth and the arts. I am on several boards, silent partner mostly. I prefer to stay out of the limelight. Brittany was sitting next to Liam, clutching his hands so tight her knuckles were white. She looked beautiful in the dress I had paid for, but her eyes were terrified. She was watching her parents spin a web of lies that was getting bigger and more fragile by the second. She knew that one wrong word could bring the whole thing crashing down. Liam looked miserable. He kept glancing at his father, then at Brittany, then down at his plate. He knew something was off. He had met Darius only once before briefly, and the man he was seeing tonight didn't match the image Brittany had painted. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. He swirled the wine in his glass, staring at the red liquid. "Brittany," he said softly, "Liam has told us so much about you. But there is one thing I am curious about." Brittany straightened up, putting on her best smile. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. We were under the impression that you were raised by your stepfather," Mr. Sterling said. Liam mentioned a Mr. King, Reginald King. The air in the room seemed to get thinner. Darius stopped drinking. Coretta stiffened. Brittany's smile faltered for a second before she forced it back into place. "Oh, Reggie," she said, her voice dismissive and light. "Yes, he is. He is technically my stepfather. I had hoped to meet him tonight," Mrs. Sterling added. "Liam speaks very highly of him. He said Mr. King ran a logistics company." Darius let out a snort of laughter. "Logistics. That is a fancy word for it." Brittany cut in quickly, her voice sharp. "Reggie is retired now. He used to drive trucks. He is a simple man, really. But surely he ran the company, Mr. Sterling pressed. No, Brittany lied, the word coming out smooth and practiced. He was an owner-operator. Just one truck. He worked very hard, of course, but he is getting old." Old Mrs. Sterling asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Brittany continued, gaining confidence in her deception. "He is very frail now. His mind isn't what it used to be. He gets confused in social situations. He wouldn't be comfortable in a place like this. He prefers to stay in his apartment and watch television. He doesn't really understand business or this world. I wasn't there, but I could feel the insult in my bones. Frail, confused, simple." She was painting a picture of a senile old man, a burden she had to carry rather than the man who had carried her. She was erasing my legacy to protect her fantasy. "And he has trouble walking," Coretta added, piling on the lie. "His knees, years of driving." "It is sad, really. That is why we didn't bring him. We didn't want him to embarrass himself or make anyone uncomfortable." Mr. Sterling looked at them. He looked at Darius in my suit, drinking whiskey like water. He looked at Coretta in her emerald gown. He looked at Brittany. And then he looked at Liam. "I see," Mr. Sterling said. "That is a shame. I have always had a great respect for men who build things with their hands." Darius sensed the mood shifting. He sensed that the Sterlings weren't impressed by the story of the frail stepfather. He needed to get the attention back on him. He needed a grand gesture, something that screamed wealth and power. He looked around for the waiter. He snapped his fingers, a sound that echoed vulgarly in the quiet restaurant. Garçon Darius shouted. The sommelier appeared at his side instantly, his face a mask of professional patience. "Yes, sir. This wine," Darius said, gesturing to the bottle on the table, which was already a very respectable vintage. "It is fine for a starter, but we are celebrating tonight. My daughter is marrying a Sterling. We need something with more power." "Certainly, sir," the sommelier said, handing him the leather-bound wine list. "What were you thinking?" Darius didn't look at the names. He didn't look at the regions. He didn't look at the grapes. He looked at the right side of the page, the column with the numbers. He ran his finger down the list until he found the biggest number he could see. "This one," Darius said, tapping the page. "The Screaming Eagle Cabernet. The 1992. The sommelier raised his eyebrows slightly, just a fraction of an inch. "An excellent choice, sir. You are aware that is a very rare vintage." Darius waved his hand dismissively. "Rare is what we do, my friend. Bring 2 bottles. One for this end of the table, and one for Mr. Sterling. 2 bottles. Brittany's eyes went wide. Liam looked at the menu over Darius's shoulder and choked on his water. "Darius," Brittany whispered. "That is—" "Don't worry, Princess," Darius said loudly, beaming at the table. "Daddy has got it covered." "Got it. Tonight is on me. I want to show the Sterlings how we treat family." Mr. Sterling looked at Darius with a new expression. It wasn't respect. It was curiosity. The kind of curiosity a scientist has when he watches a bug crawl toward a fire. That is very generous of you, Darius, Mr. Sterling said. That is a $5,000 bottle of wine. 10,000 for two, Darius corrected him with a grin. But who is counting money is just paper Richard. It is the memories that count. To the union of our families. He raised his glass. Coretta raised hers, looking around the room to make sure everyone was watching them. She looked triumphant. She looked like she had finally made it. She was dining with billionaires, drinking wine that cost more than a car, and her husband was paying for it. Or rather, she thought her husband was paying for it. She thought the platinum card in Darius's pocket, the one linked to my account, the account I had built over 40 years of sweating in shipping yards and negotiating with unions, was going to slide through that machine like silk. She didn't know the red light was already blinking on a server somewhere. She didn't know the account was flagged. She didn't know that I was sitting in my dark living room 10 miles away, visualizing this exact moment. The sommelier returned with the bottles. He presented them like holy relics. He uncorked them. He poured a taste for Darius. Darius swirled it, pretending to know what he was doing. He took a sip. He smacked his lips loudly. Now that he announced is juice. Pour it for everyone. The dark red liquid filled the glasses. The aroma of money filled the air. Darius stood up, raising his glass high. To Liam and Brittany he boomed. And to the merger of the Sterling and Jones empires. He didn't say king. He said Jones. His name. The name of a man who had never built anything but a house of cards. They clinked glasses. They drank. It was the best wine they would ever taste. And it was going to have the bitterest aftertaste in the history of dining. Because the bill was coming. The waiter was already printing it at the station. And the machine was waiting hungry for a card that was no longer valid. I could almost feel the vibration of the restaurant floor from my chair. The crash was inevitable. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to hit the brakes. I was going to let them hit the wall at full speed. Brittany laughed at something Liam said, her face flushed with the expensive wine. She looked happy. She looked relieved. She thought she had pulled it off. She thought she had successfully erased the old truck driver from her life. She had no idea that the old truck driver was the only thing standing between her and total ruin, and he had just stepped aside. The waiter approached the table with the silent grace of an executioner. He carried a small black leather folder on a silver tray, placing it gently between the crystal glasses and the remnants of the $10,000 wine. The conversation, which had been loud and boisterous thanks to Darius's liquid courage, suddenly lulled. This was the moment, the crescendo of the evening, the part where the successful businessman picks up the tab and cements his status. Darius didn't even look at the bill. He waved a hand dismissively, a gesture he must have practiced in the mirror 1,000 times. He reached into the inside pocket of my charcoal suit and pulled out the platinum card. It wasn't his card. It was the supplementary card issuing to Coretta, the one linked directly to my primary account, the one I had reported stolen exactly 45 minutes ago. Excellent service, my good man, Darius boomed, sliding the card into the folder without opening it. Add 20% for yourself. We appreciate quality here. He looked at Mr. Sterling with a smug grin, the grin of a man who thinks he has pulled off the heist of the century. Coretta beamed at him, her eyes shining with relief. They had done it. They had survived the dinner. They had charmed the billionaires. Or so they thought. The waiter bowed and took the folder. He walked away toward the payment station near the entrance. Darius leaned back, loosening his tie. So Richard, about that zoning issue in the Caymans. I was thinking we could set up a shell corporation to handle the environmental impact studies. I have a guy in Georgetown who specializes in... He stopped. The waiter was coming back. He wasn't walking with the rhythmic, confident stride of a man bringing a receipt to sign. He was walking quickly. His head lowered, the black folder held tight against his chest like a shield. He stopped next to Darius and leaned down, whispering something in his ear. It is a universal language, that whisper. It means trouble. Darius frowned. He pulled back slightly, his voice losing its artificial warmth. What do you mean? Try it again. It is a platinum card. It has no limit. The waiter kept his voice low, trying to preserve the dignity of the table, but the silence in the room was so thick that his whisper carried like a shout. I did try it, sir. 3 times. The machine says the card has been reported lost or stolen. It requires me to confiscate it. Darius's face went from a flush of alcohol to a pale gray ash. Confiscate it. That is ridiculous. That is my card. There must be a mistake with your system. Your machine is broken. Mr. Sterling straightened up. He took a sip of water, his eyes narrowing. Mrs. Sterling adjusted her pearls, looking away as if she had just seen something obscene. Sir, the waiter said, his patience wearing thin. The code is specific. Pick up card. I cannot return it. Do you have another form of payment? Coretta jumped in, her laugh high and brittle like breaking glass. Oh, honestly, these banks, they are so paranoid about security these days. We travel so much, you know. They probably flagged it because of the location. Here, use mine. She reached into her clutch purse. Her hands were shaking. She pulled out her own card. The exact same card, just with her name on it, linked to the exact same frozen account. Use this one, she said, handing it over with a trembling smile. It will go through. I used it this morning. The waiter took it. He didn't walk away this time. He pulled out a handheld terminal from his apron pocket. He inserted the card right there at the table. We all waited. The little machine beeped. A processing circle spun on the screen. Darius stared at it. Coretta stared at it. Brittany stared at it. Liam stared at the floor. Beep. The red light on the top of the machine flashed. Declined. The waiter read the screen, his voice flat. This card has also been reported stolen, ma'am. Coretta gasped. She looked at Darius. Darius looked at the ceiling. The air in the room seemed to have been sucked out. The shame was palpable. It was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating, settling over the table like a fog. That is impossible, Coretta shrieked, forgetting her society voice. I didn't report it stolen. Who reported it? Brittany stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I will pay, she said, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. I don't know what is going on with you two, but I will handle it. She grabbed her purse, the designer bag I had bought her for Christmas. She dug out her gold card, the card I had paid off every month for 5 years. Here, she snapped, thrusting it at the waiter. Just take it. The waiter looked at her. He looked at the card. He looked at the Sterlings, who were now watching the scene with open fascination, like scientists observing a lab experiment gone wrong. He inserted the third card. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Beep. Declined. Brittany froze. Her hand was still extended, waiting for the receipt that would never come. She looked at the waiter, her eyes wide with shock. Reason code 05, the waiter said mercilessly. Do not honor. Suspected fraud. He looked at the three of them. The father in the ill-fitting suit, the mother in the emerald gown, the daughter in the designer dress. 3 frauds. 3 imposters caught in the spotlight without a script. I need to ask you for a valid form of payment, the waiter said, his voice hardening. The total is $15,420, including the vintage wine you opened. $15,000. Darius patted his pockets as if he might find 15 grand in loose change. Coretta looked like she was going to faint. Brittany turned to Liam. Her eyes were pleading. She looked small. She looked young. She looked like a girl who had just realized that the safety net she had been jumping on had been cut away. Liam, she whispered. Liam Sterling looked at her. He looked at her parents. He looked at the 3 cards lying useless on the black folder. He saw the truth. He saw the lies. He saw the charade crumbling into dust. He didn't say anything. He simply reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a sleek, heavy metal card. It was black. It was real. Put it on this, Liam said quietly. No, Darius shouted, trying to salvage a shred of his ego. No, son, you don't have to do that. It is just a glitch. I can call my banker. I can get this sorted in 5 minutes. Liam didn't look at him. He looked at the waiter. Run it. The waiter took the card. He didn't need to ask if it would work. He walked away. The silence that followed was worse than the rejection. It was the silence of judgment. Mr. Sterling placed his napkin on the table. He stood up. I think we have seen enough, he said. His voice was calm, devoid of anger, which made it terrifying. It was the voice of a man closing a file. Coretta tried to stand, her legs wobbling. Richard, please let us explain. It is Reggie. He is getting old and confused. He probably pressed the wrong button on the computer. He gets paranoid. Mrs. Sterling stood up beside her husband. She picked up her purse. It seems to me, she said, her voice like ice water, that Mr. King is the only one in your family who knows exactly what he is doing. She looked at Brittany. Liam will see you home, she said. We will take our own car. They walked out. They didn't look back. They left my family sitting at the table with 3 bottles of $10,000 wine that suddenly tasted like vinegar. Darius sank into his chair. He picked up his glass of whiskey. His hand was shaking so bad the liquid splashed onto the tablecloth. "Damn banks," he muttered, his voice weak, pathetic. "Security algorithms. They are out of control. Probably thought I was in Dubai or something. Too much travel." Brittany turned on him. Her face was a mask of fury. "Shut up," she hissed. "Just shut up." She looked at Liam. Liam was signing the receipt the waiter had brought back. He added a generous tip. He capped his pen. He stood up. "Liam," Brittany said, reaching for his hand. He pulled away. "I will drive you home," he said. "But I am not driving them." He gestured to Darius and Coretta. "They can find their own way." He walked toward the exit. Brittany scrambled to follow him, leaving her parents alone at the table. Darius looked at Coretta. Coretta looked at the blocked cards. "We have to call Reggie," she whispered, terror finally creeping into her eyes. "We have to fix this." Darius drained his glass. "Reggie didn't do this by accident," he said, his voice sober for the first time all night. "The old man knows." He stood up unsteady on his feet. "Come on," he said. "Let's go." Before they asked for the tip and cash, they walked out of the restaurant. The waiter watched them go. The other diners watched them go. They walked past the valet stand. They couldn't get the Mercedes. The valet ticket was in the car and the car key was in my pocket back at the apartment. I had swapped them before they left. They stood on the curb in their expensive clothes, the cold wind whipping around them. Darius checked his pockets. He had no cash. Coretta had no cash. Their cards were dead. They had to walk. And back in my apartment 10 miles away, I watched the red lights on my screen and I finally turned off the computer. The lesson had begun. The sun had barely begun to bleed through the sheer curtains of my living room when the first assault on my peace began. It was 7 in the morning. For 40 years, 7 in the morning had been the middle of my workday, a time of diesel fumes and loading docks, but now it was my time of silence. I sat in my favorite armchair, the leather worn soft and cracked like the skin on my hands, a cup of black coffee steaming on the side table. I was wearing my old gray sweatpants and a faded t-shirt that advertised a hardware store that went out of business in 1998. I looked like exactly what they said I was. A nobody, an old man taking up space. I heard the key turn in the lock. It was an aggressive sound, metal grinding against metal with unnecessary force. I hadn't changed the locks yet. I wanted them to come. I wanted this confrontation. I took a slow sip of coffee, the bitter heat grounding me, preparing me for the hurricane that was about to blow through my front door. The door flew open, hitting the stopper with a thud that echoed through the penthouse. They spilled into the hallway like a chemical spill, toxic and volatile. Brittany led the charge, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Behind her was Coretta, looking haggard, her expensive emerald gown from the night before now wrinkled and sad in the morning light. Then Darius, looking like a man who had slept in a suit that didn't fit him, his eyes bloodshot and darting around the room. And finally, trailing behind like a prisoner of war, was Liam. Liam looked shell-shocked. He was wearing yesterday's tuxedo, his tie undone, his hair messy. He looked at me, then at the apartment, then back at me. I met his gaze over the rim of my coffee mug. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just watched. "Reggie," Brittany screamed, her voice cracking. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. She stomped into the living room, her heels clicking violently on the hardwood floor. She threw her designer purse onto the sofa, the same sofa she had told me was too ugly for guests to see. "What did you do?" she shrieked, standing over me. "What the hell did you do?" I set my coffee cup down slowly. I made sure it made no sound against the coaster. I looked up at her. She was vibrating with rage. "Good morning to you too, Brittany," I said, my voice calm, deep, the voice of a man who had negotiated strikes and stared down mobsters. "Don't you play dumb with me," she yelled, pointing a manicured finger in my face. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The dinner, the cards, you humiliated us." Coretta stepped forward, her face a mixture of exhaustion and entitlement. She looked at me with that familiar disappointment, the look that said I had failed her simply by existing. "Reggie, how could you?" Coretta asked, her voice trembling with a performance of victimhood. "We were stranded. Do you understand, stranded?" The waiter looked at us like we were criminals. Darius tried to pay and the card was declined. I tried to pay and the card was declined. Brittany tried to pay. Declined. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? Darius puffed out his chest, trying to regain some of the dignity he had lost the night before. He adjusted his tie, trying to look imposing in my living room, wearing my suit. "It was a disgrace, old man," Darius growled. "You disrespected me. You disrespected my daughter. You disrespected the Sterlings. I had a $5,000 bottle of wine on that table, and you made me look like a fool." I picked up my coffee again. I looked at Darius. "You ordered a $5,000 bottle of wine?" I asked. Darius blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Yes, to celebrate, to show them who we are. And you intended to pay for it with what I asked." "With the card," Darius shouted. "With the card you gave Coretta." I turned my gaze back to Brittany. She was pacing now like a caged tiger. "Liam had to pay." Brittany spat out the words like they tasted bad. "Liam, my fiancé, he had to cover the whole bill. $15,000, Reggie. $15,000 because you decided to play games with the bank. He had to drive us home because the valet wouldn't release the Mercedes. We had to squeeze into his car like refugees." She stopped pacing and looked at me, her eyes wet with angry tears. "You ruined everything," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You ruined the most important night of my life. I told them you were sick. I told them you were confused. I tried to protect your reputation, and this is how you repay me, by cutting us off, by humiliating me in front of the people I am trying to impress." I looked at Liam again. He was standing by the door, uncomfortable, shifting his weight. He was listening to every word. He was hearing his fiancée admit to the lies. He was hearing her admit that she saw me as nothing more than a bank account that had malfunctioned. I took another sip of coffee. It was getting cold, but I didn't mind. "Are you finished?" I asked. "No, I am not finished," Brittany screamed. "I want to know why. Did you forget to pay the bill? Did the bank freeze the accounts by mistake? You need to call them right now. Right now, Reggie, you need to fix this. You need to apologize to Liam. You need to transfer the money to him immediately to cover that dinner. And then you need to explain to me why I shouldn't cut you out of my life completely for this stunt." Coretta nodded in agreement. "Yes, Reggie. Call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. We can still salvage this. We can tell the Sterlings it was identity theft or a system error. Just fix it." I looked at the three of them, my wife, my stepdaughter, and the man who had taken my place at the table. They looked so desperate. They looked so entitled. They truly believed that this was a mistake. They truly believed that the money was theirs by right and that I was just the steward who had failed in his duties. I set the coffee cup down for the last time. I placed my hands on the armrests of the chair and pushed myself up. My knees popped slightly. I stood to my full height. I am not a small man. I spent 40 years lifting crates and changing tires. I might be 75, but I am still a mountain when I want to be. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the city. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable, until they started to fidget. "It wasn't a mistake," I said, keeping my back to them. What Coretta asked. "It wasn't a system error," I said, turning around to face them. "And I didn't forget to pay the bill." "Then what happened?" Brittany demanded. "Why were our cards declined?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Because I reported them stolen," I said. The room went deadly silent. You could hear the traffic outside. You could hear Darius breathing heavily through his nose. You what?" Coretta whispered. "I reported them stolen," I repeated, enunciating every word clearly, "because they were being used by people who are not my family." Brittany's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple and red. "Not your family," she screeched. "I am your daughter." "No," I said calmly. "You made that very clear yesterday. You told me I was never your father. You told me Darius was your father. You told me I was just the man who paid the bills." Brittany stammered, looking for a way out. I was just stressed. I didn't mean it like that. You meant exactly that," I said. And I listened. I finally listened to you, Brittany. You said I wasn't your father, so I accepted your truth. And if I am not your father, then you are not my dependent. And if you are not my dependent, then you have no business carrying a gold card with my name on the account. I turned to Coretta. "And you," I said. "You stood there and let her say it. You told me to stay home like a dog. You gave my suit to him. You gave my car to him. And you gave my card to him." I pointed a finger at Darius. He flinched. "That card," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "That platinum card. It says Reginald King on the account. It does not say Darius Jones. When you handed that card to him, Coretta, you committed fraud. You authorized a stranger to spend my money. So I did what any responsible account holder would do. I shut it down. Darius stepped forward, trying to look menacing. Now look here, old man. You can't talk to us like that. We are family. You owe us. I owe you. I laughed. A cold, dry sound. I owe you. I bailed you out of jail 3 times, Darius. I paid for your rehab. I paid for the suit you are sweating in right now. I don't owe you the steam off my coffee. Brittany stepped between us. Her eyes were wild. This is insane, she yelled. You did this on purpose. You stranded us there on purpose to teach us a lesson. You are a sick, sad old man. Those were our cards, Reggie. You had no right. I took a step toward her. Just one step. But it was enough to make her stop yelling. They were never your cards, Brittany, I said softly. I reached into the pocket of my old flannel shirt. I pulled out my own wallet. It was worn leather shaped to my hip. I opened it. I pulled out my ID. I held it up. Read the name I said. She stared at it. Read it, I commanded. Reginald King, she whispered. Exactly, I said. My name is on the accounts. My name is on the deeds. My name is on the trust fund you think is waiting for you. My blood, sweat, and tears put the balance in those accounts. You never earned a dime of it. You never drove a mile. You never loaded a pallet. You just spent it. I put the wallet back in my pocket. You said I was just the man who pays the bills, I said. Well, I am resigning from that position. Effective immediately. Brittany looked at Liam. She looked at him with panic in her eyes. She realized that he was seeing everything. He was seeing the poverty of her character. He was seeing the lie of her life. Liam, she said, her voice high and desperate. He is lying. He is senile. We told you. He gets confused. He thinks he owns things he doesn't own. Liam didn't look at her. He was looking at me. He was looking at me with a strange expression. It wasn't pity. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. He stepped forward past Brittany, past Darius. He walked right up to me. Brittany tried to grab his arm. Liam, don't. He is dangerous. Liam shook her off. He stopped 3 feet from me. He looked at my face. He looked at the lines around my eyes. He looked at my hands, calloused and strong. He took a breath. Mr. King, he asked. I nodded. That is my name, son. Liam swallowed hard. He looked around the modest apartment, at the old furniture, at the lack of pretension. Then he looked back at me. My father told me stories, Liam said quietly. He told me about a man named King who started with 1 truck in 1975. He told me about a man who saved his business in the blizzard of '96 by getting a convoy through when no one else could. He told me that man was a legend. He told me that man was a giant. I smiled. A small, tired smile. Your father has a good memory. Liam turned slowly to look at Brittany. His face was pale. You told me he was a driver, Liam said. You told me he was nobody. He is nobody, Brittany shouted. He is just a stepdad. Liam turned back to me. Sir, he said, his voice trembling slightly, if you are who I think you are, then who are they? He gestured to the 3 people standing in my living room in their ruined finery. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had consumed my life for 20 years. They, I said, looking at Liam, they are the people who just realized that the free ride is over. And then I sat back down in my armchair. I picked up my cold coffee. Now, I said, get out of my house. All of you. Brittany opened her mouth to scream, but Liam turned and walked out the door. He didn't wait for her. He didn't look back. Brittany stared at the open door. Then she stared at me. I hate you, she hissed. I know, I said, taking a sip. But at least now you can hate me for free. Darius didn't like being told to leave. He didn't like being told the free ride was over. But most of all, he didn't like the fact that the man he had called a nobody, the man whose suit he was wearing and whose car he had driven, was looking at him with eyes that held no fear. The silence in the room following my command to get out was short-lived. It was broken by a low growl from Darius's throat. He took a step toward me, his hands balling into fists at his sides. He was a big man, tall and broad, but it was the kind of size that came from beer and bad food, not from lifting crates at 4 a.m. He tried to use his physical presence to intimidate me, to remind me that, in his mind, I was just an old man in a flannel shirt, and he was the alpha male. You think you can talk to me like that, old man, Darius spat, taking another step closer, invading my personal space. You think because you paid a few bills you are the king of the castle? You are nothing. You are a driver. You spent your life sitting on a cushion hauling other people's garbage. He pointed a finger in my face. The nail was dirty despite the expensive manicure Coretta had treated him to. You are confused, Darius sneered. You are senile. You probably forgot where you put your own keys, let alone how to run a bank account. You are going to call the bank right now, and you are going to apologize, and you are going to fix this mess, or I am going to show you exactly what happens when you disrespect your betters. Brittany stood behind him, her face twisted in a smirk of cruel satisfaction. She wanted this. She wanted her real father to put her stepdad in his place. She wanted the brute force of Darius to crush the quiet dignity I had tried to teach her. Go on, Dad, she urged him, her voice high and shrill. Tell him. Make him understand. He thinks he can humiliate us. He thinks he can ruin my life. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at Darius's finger hovering an inch from my nose. I had seen men like Darius 1,000 times in my life. They were the ones who talked the loudest at the union meetings, but were the first to cross the picket line. They were the ones who bragged about their street fights, but ran when the real trouble started. You are in my light, Darius, I said calmly. He turned purple. He raised his hand as if to grab my collar. I wouldn't do that if I were you, I warned him, my voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. I might be 75, but I still know how to break a wrist. Darius hesitated. He saw something in my eyes that gave him pause. It was the look of a man who had nothing left to lose. But before Darius could decide whether to strike or retreat, movement caught my eye. Liam. The boy who had been standing by the door, the billionaire heir who had paid $15,000 for a dinner he didn't eat, had stepped forward. He wasn't looking at Darius. He wasn't looking at Brittany. He was looking at me. He had been quiet for a long time, watching, listening, putting the pieces together. The rage in the room seemed to flow around him like water around a rock. He walked past Brittany, who tried to grab his arm again. Liam, wait, she hissed, desperation creeping into her voice. Don't listen to him. He is crazy. We need to go. Liam ignored her. He walked past Darius, effectively cutting off the line of aggression. He stepped between us, shielding me not with force, but with presence. He stood there for a moment, just looking at me. His face had lost the color of anger and embarrassment. Now it was pale, almost white. His eyes were wide, scanning my face, searching for something. He looked at the scar above my left eyebrow, where a chain had snapped back in '82. He looked at the way I held my coffee cup. He looked at the set of my jaw. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. Darius tried to push past him. Out of the way, kid. I am handling this. Liam didn't even turn around. He just held up a hand, silencing Darius instantly. The authority in that gesture was natural, bred into him by generations of power. It was the kind of authority Darius could only pretend to have. Liam took a step closer to me. He was trembling. I could see the fine vibration in his hands. Mr. King, he said softly. I looked at him. Yes, son. Liam swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. My father, he stammered. My father is Richard Sterling. You know that. I nodded. I know Richard. We did business in the 90s. He was a tough negotiator. Fair, but tough. Liam let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 10 minutes. My father talks about a man named Reggie King, he said, his voice gaining strength but still filled with awe. He talks about him at every board meeting. He tells us the story of the great blizzard of '96. He tells us about the logistics company that refused to shut down when the state highways were closed. He says there was one man who personally drove a convoy of medical supplies through a whiteout to get to the city hospitals because the helicopters were grounded. I took a sip of my coffee. I remembered that night. I remembered the cold. I remembered the white blindness of the snow and the weight of the responsibility. It had to be done, I said simply. People were waiting. Liam stared at me. His eyes were watering. My father said that man saved the city, he whispered. He said that man built King Logistics from a single truck into the largest distribution network on the East Coast. He said that man was a giant, a legend. He said he tried to buy him out 5 times, and every time the man said no because he wanted to keep his employees safe. Brittany let out a nervous laugh. Liam, what are you talking about? Reggie is a driver. He just drove the trucks. He didn't own anything. He is nobody. Liam spun around. The movement was so sudden and violent that Brittany flinched. Nobody. Liam shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. Nobody. Do you know where we are, Brittany? Do you know what building this is? Brittany looked around confused. We are in his apartment. In the city. Liam pointed to the floor. We are in the King Tower, he said. This building. This entire block. It is named the King Tower. I thought it was a coincidence. I thought maybe he just rented a place here. But then I saw the logo on his old t-shirt. He pointed at my chest, at the faded logo of the hardware store. That isn't a hardware store, Liam said. That is the logo of the original King Transport fleet. My father has a picture of it in his office. It is framed. He turned back to me. He looked like he wanted to kneel. Sir Liam said, his voice shaking again. My father has been trying to get a meeting with the owner of this building for 3 years. He wants to lease the commercial space on the ground floor for his flagship store. He said the owner is a ghost. He said the owner is a recluse who never takes meetings. He paused, taking a deep breath. You are the landlord, aren't you? The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear Darius's heavy breathing stop. You could hear Coretta's heart breaking as the realization hit her. Brittany's mouth fell open. She looked from Liam to me, her eyes wide with shock and denial. That is impossible, she whispered. He is broke. He wears flannel. He drives an old truck. I set my coffee cup down. I looked at Liam. He was a good kid. He was smart. He paid attention. I own the building, son, I said, my voice calm and steady, and the warehouse district downtown, and the distribution hubs in Jersey. I kept a few things when I sold the fleet. A man has to have a hobby. Liam covered his face with his hands. Oh my God, he muttered. Oh my God. I just watched my fiancée humiliate the most powerful man in the logistics industry. I watched her father try to stiff him on a dinner bill. He looked up at me. His face was a mask of pure mortification. Mr. King, he said, his voice trembling. Please. I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I would never have let them speak to you like that. My father would kill me if he knew I was standing here while you were disrespected in your own home. He bowed his head. It wasn't a nod, it was a bow, a deep, respectful bow of a man acknowledging a superior. Please accept my apologies, sir, he said. I looked at him. I saw the sincerity. I saw the respect. Apology accepted, Liam, I said. You didn't raise them. You just got caught in their orbit. Darius made a choking sound. He looked at the walls of the apartment as if they had suddenly turned to gold. He looked at me with a mixture of terror and greed. You own the building, Darius stammered. The whole building. I ignored him. I looked at Brittany. She was frozen. Her face was pale as a sheet. She was running the math in her head. She was replaying every insult, every eye roll, every time she had called me a simple driver. She was realizing that the wallet she had despised was actually a bank vault, and she had just thrown away the combination. Liam, I said gently, I think it is time for you to go. You have a lot to think about. Liam nodded. He straightened his tie. He looked at Brittany. The look of love was gone. It was replaced by something cold, something like disgust. You lied to me, he said to her. You told me he was a charity case. You told me he was nothing. He wasn't my real father, Brittany cried, grabbing his arm. It doesn't matter what he owns. He is just the stepdad. He is a better man than anyone in this room, Liam said, pulling his arm away. And he is certainly richer than anyone in this room. My father respects him, and that means more to me than your bloodline. He turned to me. Good day, Mr. King. It was an honor to meet you, even under these circumstances. He walked out. The door closed softly behind him. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a bomb that had just gone off, leaving only dust and ringing ears. I looked at my family. The 3 of them stood there staring at me. They looked small. They looked cheap. They looked like what they were. Well, I said, picking up my coffee again. You heard the man. I took a sip. I believe I asked you to leave. The air in the room was thick enough to choke on. Liam stood there looking at me as if I were a monument he had just discovered in the middle of a desert. The respect in his eyes was real. The shock was real. But for Coretta and Brittany, reality was something flexible, something they could bend and twist until it fit the narrative they had constructed for themselves. They couldn't accept what Liam was saying because accepting it meant admitting that they had been blind fools for 20 years. It meant admitting that the gold mine they had been searching for had been sitting in their living room the whole time, and they had treated it like a pile of dirt. Coretta was the first to break the silence. She let out a laugh, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was a high, jagged noise that sounded like a car engine trying to turn over in freezing weather. She walked over to Liam, her heels clacking aggressively on the floor, and placed a hand on his arm. Her fingers dug into his tuxedo jacket, desperate to pull him back into her delusion. "Liam, honey," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension. "You are confused. It has been a long night. We are all tired. You are mixing things up." Liam looked down at her hand as if it were a spider. He pulled his arm away slowly, deliberately. "I am not confused," Mrs. King Liam said, his voice cold. "I know my father's business. I know the legends of the industry." Coretta shook her head violently, her perfect hair flying around her face. No, you don't understand. Reggie is... Reggie. Look at him." She gestured wildly in my direction. I sat there in my armchair holding my coffee, watching her unravel. "Look at his clothes," Liam Coretta shouted, panic rising in her throat. "Look at this furniture. It is old. It is cheap. Does this look like the home of a tycoon? Does this look like the home of a man your father would respect? He is a driver. That is all he ever was. He drove routes. He came home smelling of diesel and sweat. He fixes the sink with duct tape. He clips coupons for the grocery store." She turned to me, her eyes wide and pleading, begging me to validate her lie. "Tell him, Reggie. Tell him you just drove the trucks. Tell him you don't own the building. Tell him you are just a retired employee living on a pension. Stop this charade right now before you ruin Brittany's life." Brittany jumped in, sensing her mother's desperation. She moved to Liam's other side, trying to box him in. "Liam, please," Brittany pleaded, tears streaming down her face again. "He lies. He makes things up. It is part of his condition. He likes to tell stories to make himself feel important. He probably heard about the King Tower and just adopted the name. He is sick, Liam. We told you he was sick. Why would you believe a senile old man over us? We are your family. We are the ones who love you." I watched them dance. It was a pathetic dance. They were flailing, drowning in the shallow water of their own ignorance. They were so invested in the idea of my mediocrity that they couldn't see the truth standing 6 feet tall in front of them. They needed me to be small so they could feel big. They needed me to be weak so they could feel strong. Liam looked at Brittany. His expression was one of profound disappointment. It was the look a man gives a woman when he realizes he has fallen in love with a mask. "My father doesn't tell stories about drivers," Brittany Liam said quietly. "He tells stories about leaders, and he has a photo of this man in his office. I recognize him now. It is the eyes. You can fake a suit. You can fake an address. You can't fake those eyes." Darius, who had been cowering by the window, decided to try one last Hail Mary. He stepped forward, adjusting the lapels of my suit, trying to summon some of his street toughness. "Listen here, pretty boy," Darius growled. "You are disrespecting my family. This old man is a fraud. I have known him for years. He is a worker ant, nothing more. If he owned this building, why would he let me drive his car? Why would he let us treat him like this?" He gestured vaguely at the room, at the situation. "Because he is weak," Darius concluded. "Because he is a doormat. Rich men aren't doormats. Rich men have power. This guy, he is just waiting to die." I let out a chuckle. It started low in my chest and rumbled up until it filled the room. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has held the winning hand for 2 decades and is finally laying it down on the table. I stood up. I didn't need the cane. I didn't need the armrests. I stood up on my own 2 legs, the legs that had walked picket lines and factory floors. I walked over to the mantel where the picture of Brittany's graduation lay face down. I picked it up. I looked at the back of the frame, then I looked at them. "You ask why, Darius," I said, my voice filling the room without shouting. "You ask why a rich man would live like this, why he would let you drive his car, why he would pay your bills." I walked toward them. They stepped back instinctively. "Because I wanted to see," I said. "I wanted to see who you were. I wanted to know if you loved me or if you loved what I could give you." I looked at Coretta. I wanted to know if the woman I took from the projects loved Reggie the man or Reggie the wallet. I looked at Brittany. I wanted to know if the girl I raised, the girl I taught to ride a bike, the girl I sat up with when she had fevers loved her father or just her sponsor. I paused. The room was silent. And now I know, I said. You didn't just fail the test, you burned the test paper and danced on the ashes. Coretta sobbed. Reggie, no. That is not true. We love you. Stop it, I barked. The sound was like a gunshot. Stop lying, just stop. I turned to Liam. You are right, son, I said. I was a driver. Coretta let out a breath of relief. See, Liam? He admits it. I smiled at her. A wolf smile. I drove a 1974 Mack truck, I continued. I hauled steel from Pittsburgh to Philly. I slept in the cab. I ate beans out of a can. I drove 18 hours a day. I took a step closer to Brittany. Yes, I drove a truck. But what your mother forgot to mention, what she never bothered to ask, is that I bought a second truck, and then a third, and then I bought the depot, and then I bought the competition. I leaned in, looking straight into Brittany's terrified eyes. I drove a truck, Brittany, but I also owned the 500 trucks behind it. I owned the dispatch center. I owned the logistics software. I owned the contracts with the shipping lines. Every time you saw a King Logistics truck on the highway, every time you saw that Crown logo, that was me. That was my sweat turning into your tuition. That was my diesel turning into your designer bags. Brittany shook her head, tears flying. No, you can't be. You are just Reggie. I am Reginald King, I said, and I am the man who has been financing your delusion. The truth hit them like a physical blow. It wasn't just money. It was the power dynamic. They had spent years treating me like a servant, thinking they were the masters because they were young and beautiful and connected. But all along they had been guests in my kingdom, eating at my table, sleeping under my roof alive only because I allowed it. Liam looked at me with a mixture of awe and sadness. He saw the tragedy of it. He saw the wasted years. Reggie. Mrs. King. Brittany stammered. I didn't know. If you had known, you would have treated me better, I asked. Is that it? You would have respected the millionaire, but you spat on the truck driver. She didn't answer. She couldn't answer. The answer was yes, and we all knew it. And that was the sin. That was the unforgivable thing. I walked back to my chair. I didn't sit down. I stood behind it, gripping the leather. You made a statement yesterday, Brittany, I said. You said something very specific. You said you were never my father. Brittany wiped her face, her makeup smearing. I was angry. I didn't mean it. Words have meaning, I said. You said it. You said Darius was your father. You said I was just the man who paid. I pointed at the door. Well, the payment plan has been canceled. Brittany looked at the door, then back at me. What? You heard me, I said. You have a father. He is standing right there. He is wearing my suit. He is drinking my whiskey. He is the man you chose. He is the man you took to the dinner. He is the man you wanted to present to the world. I looked at Darius. He was shrinking, trying to make himself invisible. So go with him, I said. Brittany looked around the apartment she had grown up in. The apartment that was in the center of the city, in the building I owned. But where will I go? She whispered. This is my home. No, I said. This is my home. This is the home of Reginald King and his family. And you made it very clear yesterday that you are not my family. I looked at Coretta. She was leaning against the wall, looking like she was about to slide down it. And you, Coretta, I said. You chose your side. You chose the image. You chose the lie. You stood by and let her disrespect me. You helped her do it. You handed my card to another man. Coretta pushed herself off the wall. Reggie, please, we are married. You can't just kick me out. I can, I said. And I am. I will have my lawyer send the papers, but for now you are guests who have overstayed your welcome. I looked at all three of them. Get out, I said. Get out of my apartment. Get out of my building. Get out of my life. Brittany looked at Liam. She reached for him one last time. Liam, please, talk to him. He is crazy. He is throwing me on the street. Liam stepped back. He looked at her with cold, dead eyes. He isn't throwing you on the street, Brittany, Liam said. He is just letting you go to your real father. Isn't that what you wanted? He turned to me. He nodded. Goodbye, Mr. King. Liam walked out. Brittany let out a wail that sounded like an animal in a trap. She looked at Darius. Do something, she screamed. Do something, Dad. Darius looked at me. He looked at my hands. He looked at the door. Let's go, he muttered. Let's just go. He grabbed Brittany's arm. He grabbed Coretta's arm. He dragged them toward the door. They were crying. They were screaming. They were begging. I didn't listen. I watched them go. I watched them stumble out into the hallway I owned in the building I owned. I walked to the door. I placed my hand on the heavy wood. I looked at them one last time. 3 frauds in the harsh light of the morning. I slammed the door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. The silence returned. It was a different silence this time. It wasn't the silence of waiting. It was the silence of emptiness. I was alone. I walked back to the living room. I picked up the picture of Brittany's graduation from the mantel. I looked at the back of the frame. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the trash can. I dropped the picture in. It was done. The ledger was balanced. The account was closed. I poured the rest of my cold coffee down the sink. I washed the cup. I dried it. I put it away in the cupboard. Then I went to my office. I had a phone call to make. I had to call Jamal. We had a lot of legal work to do, and I had to call the security desk downstairs. I had to tell them that 3 individuals were to be barred from the premises. Permanently. My name is Reginald King. I drove trucks for 40 years. I know how to deliver. And I had just delivered the hardest lesson of their lives. The hallway outside my penthouse is long and wide, lined with marble that echoes every sound. It was designed to be impressive, to intimidate, but right now it was just a stage for the final act of a tragedy. Liam had stopped near the elevator banks. He hadn't pressed the button yet. He was standing there with his back to the apartment, his shoulders hunched as if he were carrying a physical weight. Brittany ran after him. She looked nothing like the polished socialite she tried so hard to be. Her mascara was running, her hair was wild, and she was tripping over the hem of her expensive dress. Liam, she cried out, her voice bouncing off the cold stone walls. Liam, wait. You can't just leave like this. We need to talk. Liam turned around slowly. His face wasn't angry. Anger I could have understood. Anger burns out. What I saw on his face was something colder and more permanent. It was a loss of faith. He looked at the woman he was supposed to marry, and he didn't recognize her. He reached out and took her arm, not gently, but with a firm grip, pulling her away from the elevator doors and into the alcove near the emergency stairs. It was a private spot, but the acoustics of the hallway meant I could hear every word from my doorway. I didn't step back inside. I leaned against the doorframe, my coffee cup still warm in my hand, and I watched. I had paid for the ticket to this show after all. I might as well see the ending. Brittany, he said, his voice low and intense. Do you have any idea what you have done? Do you have any concept of the reality we are living in right now? Brittany tried to touch his face, but he pulled back. Baby, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face again. It is not what it looks like. Reggie is complicated. He likes to play games. He tricked us. He wanted to embarrass me. Liam shook his head, his eyes narrowing. He didn't trick you, Brittany. He existed. He lived his life. You were the one who erased him. You told me he was a charity case. You told me he was a burden. You let me sit there at dinner and listen to your parents lie about him for 2 hours. He pointed a finger toward my apartment, toward me. That man is Reginald King, Liam said, emphasizing each syllable. Do you know what that name means in my house? My father has a plaque in his study with a quote from him about integrity in business. My family values honesty. Brittany, we value partnership. We don't build our lives on fraud. And that is what this is. This is fraud. You sold me a fake version of your life. Brittany's panic was rising, turning into hysteria. She grabbed Liam's lapels, shaking him slightly. It is not fraud. It is him. He is the toxic one. Look at what he did tonight. He cut off my cards. He stranded us. Who does that to their own child? He is secretive, Liam. He hides money. He hoards it while we struggle. He watched me stress about the wedding budget and he didn't say a word. That is financial abuse. That is manipulation. She was spinning it, trying to find an angle where she was the victim. It was a skill she had learned from Coretta. If you are caught stealing, blame the owner for leaving the vault unlocked. He is a monster, she screamed, pointing a trembling hand at me. He enjoys this. He likes seeing us suffer. He is a sick, sad old man who gets off on controlling us with his silence. He isn't the hero your father thinks he is. He is a liar. Darius, who had been lurking near the elevator, waiting for a chance to escape, saw an opening. He stepped forward, adjusting his tie, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "She is right, son," Darius said, his voice booming in the hallway. "You don't know this guy like we do. He is a con man, a hustler. Maybe he owns the building, maybe he doesn't. But look at how he lives. Look at how he treats his family. No real man treats his flesh and blood like this." Darius walked up to Liam, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "He is a fraud." Darius insisted, his eyes darting to me with hatred. "He probably stole the deed. He probably swindled his way to the top. You can't trust a man who hides his wealth. Honest men live in the light. This guy, he lives in the shadows. He is playing you, son. He is trying to break us up because he is jealous. He is jealous that I am the real father, and he is just the checkbook." I took a sip of coffee. Jealous. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Liam looked at Darius's hand on his shoulder. He looked at it with the same expression one might look at a leech. He brushed it off with a sharp, violent movement. "Don't touch me," Liam said, his voice icy. "And don't talk to me about real men. A real man pays his own bills. A real man doesn't wear another man's suit to a dinner he can't afford." Darius recoiled as if slapped. He opened his mouth to argue, but Liam cut him off. "And you, Brittany," Liam said, turning back to her, "you are calling him toxic. You are calling him secretive. You spent his money for 20 years. You drove his car. You wore his clothes. You lived in his house. And the moment he asks for a little respect, you try to destroy him." Liam took a step back, creating physical distance between them. It was a symbolic chasm widening by the second. "My father always told me that you can judge a person's character by how they treat people who can do nothing for them," Liam said. "I watched you treat the waiter like dirt. I watched you treat your stepfather like a ghost. And now I find out he is the only reason you have anything at all." Brittany was sobbing now, ugly, gasping sobs. "Liam, please. I love you. Don't do this. We can fix this. I will cut him off. I will never speak to him again. We can just be us." Liam shook his head slowly. "There is no us, Brittany. Not right now. I don't know who you are. You. The woman I proposed to, she didn't exist. She was a character you played, funded by a man you despise." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his car keys. "I am going home," Liam said. "I need to think. I need to talk to my father. I need to tell him that the man he admires is the man my fiancé's family tried to bury." Brittany reached for him again, but he held up a hand. "Don't," he said. "Just don't. I need space. I need to reevaluate everything, including this wedding." The words hung in the hallway like a death sentence. Reevaluate the wedding. In the language of the rich, that meant it was over. It meant the lawyers were going to be called. It meant the deposit was gone. Liam hit the call button for the elevator. The light dinged softly. The doors slid open. He stepped inside. He didn't look back at Brittany. He didn't look at Darius. He looked at me. He nodded once. A short, respectful nod. I lifted my coffee cup in return. A salute from one honest man to another. The doors closed. Brittany stood there, staring at the brushed steel surfaces of the elevator doors. She was shaking. Her hands were clenched at her sides. Her dream, the sterling name, the life of leisure, the escape from mediocrity, it had all just gone down the shaft. She turned slowly. Her eyes locked onto mine. She looked like a cornered animal. "This is your fault," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the empty hallway. "You did this. You poisoned him against me. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to." The truth had done all the talking necessary. Coretta came out of the apartment, then nervously clutching her purse. She had been hiding, listening, waiting to see which way the wind blew. Now she saw the devastation. "Brittany, baby," Coretta asked tentatively. "Shut up," Brittany screamed at her mother. "Just shut up." Darius leaned against the wall, looking defeated. He knew the game was up. He knew there was no more wine, no more free rides, no more Mercedes. I stepped back into my apartment. I placed my hand on the heavy oak door. "You have 5 minutes to clear the hallway," I said, "or I am calling security to remove trespassers from my building." I didn't wait for a response. I slammed the door shut. I turned the deadbolt. I engaged the chain. I leaned my back against the door, listening. I heard Brittany screaming. I heard Coretta crying. I heard Darius cursing. It was the sound of a house of cards collapsing. I walked back to my chair and sat down. My coffee was cold, but I drank it anyway. It tasted like victory. The silence in the apartment was different now. It was clean. It was empty. It was mine. They were gone. The leeches had been detached. The wound would heal. I was Reginald King. I was alone. And for the first time in 20 years, I was free. The morning sun didn't bring peace. It brought a strategy. It was 6 a.m. when my secure line rang. Only 5 people on God's green earth had that number. 1 was Jamal, my lawyer, Sheemood. 3 were my top drivers from the old days, and the last one was Deacon Mosley, the head of the church board at Greater Mount Zion Baptist. Reggie. Mosley's voice was low, vibrating with the kind of hushed urgency usually reserved for funerals or scandals. We got a situation down here. Your son-in-law, Darius. He called the pastor late last night. He was crying, Reggie, weeping like a child, said he needs to give a testimony today, said the Spirit moved him to speak about family forgiveness and financial oppression. Financial oppression? I repeated the words, tasting like copper in my mouth. That was a fancy way of saying I had cut off the gravy train and the passengers were getting bruised. He is planning an ambush, isn't he? I asked, setting my coffee cup down on the granite counter. He is planning a show, Mosley confirmed. He told the pastor you put his family on the street. Said you are hoarding the Lord's blessings while your own flesh and blood starve in a Motel 6. He wants to shame you, Reggie. He thinks if he cries in front of 500 people you will fold to save your reputation. My reputation. They didn't understand. My reputation wasn't built on being a soft touch or a nice guy. It was built on being a man of my word. A man who delivered the cargo no matter the weather. And today my cargo was the truth. Let him speak, I said, my voice steady. Are you sure, Reggie? Mosley asked, hesitation creeping in. We can stop him. We can tell him the schedule is full. We can protect you. No, I said, standing up. My knees popped a reminder of the years, but my back was straight. Let him talk. Give him the microphone. Give him the spotlight. Just make sure the projector is working. The projector, trust me. Deacon, just make sure it is plugged in. I hung up. I didn't go back to bed. I went to my office. I moved the Persian rug and unlocked the floor safe. I didn't take out money. I didn't take out gold. I took out the red file. It was a dossier I had been compiling for 20 years, not because I wanted to use it, but because a smart businessman always keeps insurance. I opened it on my desk. The smell of old paper filled the room, dry and dusty like the past. It was all there, the ledger of my life with them. The canceled checks from 1998 when I paid off Darius's first gambling debt so he wouldn't get his legs broken by a bookie in Newark. $5,000. The receipt from the private clinic in 2004 when Coretta got pregnant by mistake while I was on the road for 3 weeks hauling steel to Chicago. I knew I couldn't have children. The doctors told me that in '79, sterile. But I paid for the procedure. I paid to keep her secret. I paid to keep the peace because I loved the little girl who called me daddy. The tuition payments for Brittany, the car notes, the bail bonds, the silence money, and the pièce de résistance. The sealed envelope from the DNA lab, the one I had never opened in front of them, the one that proved exactly what I was buying all these years. I put the file in my leather briefcase. It was heavy. It weighed 20 years of lies. I dressed slowly. I didn't wear the denim jacket today. I wore my black 3-piece suit, the one I wore to bury my enemies. I polished my shoes until they shone like mirrors. I tied my tie with a Windsor knot tight and perfect. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see an old, retired driver. I saw the CEO of King Logistics going to a board meeting to fire the whole department. I drove to the church. The parking lot was full. Greater Mount Zion was a mega church, the kind with cameras and live streams and a choir that could shake the rafters. Darius had chosen his battlefield well. He wanted maximum damage. He wanted the whole community to see Reginald King as a monster. I saw them near the entrance. Darius was wearing a suit that looked like he bought it at a thrift store on the way over. It was ill-fitting and slightly rumpled. It was part of the costume. The poor, struggling father. Coretta was wearing a modest dress, no jewelry, looking humble and downtrodden, a stark contrast to the Chanel-wearing woman of Tuesday night. Brittany was wearing flats and no makeup, looking like a child who had been kicked out into the cold. They were shaking hands. They were hugging the greeters. I saw Darius wipe a fake tear from his eye as he spoke to Sister Patterson, the biggest gossip in the choir. They were working the room. They were planting the seeds. I got out of my car. I carried my briefcase. I walked up the steps. The crowd parted for me. People greeted me, "Morning, Brother King." "God bless you, Mr. King." but I could see the looks, the side eyes, the whispers behind hymnals. The poison was already spreading. They were wondering if the rumors were true. They were wondering if the man who anonymously donated the new roof was actually a tyrant at home. I didn't stop. I didn't clarify. I walked straight past Darius. He saw me. For a second, his mask slipped. He looked scared. But then he saw the briefcase. He probably thought it was a settlement. He probably thought I had come to buy his silence before he got on stage. He smirked, a little arrogant twitch of his lips. He thought he had won. I walked into the sanctuary. I didn't sit in my usual pew in the third row. I walked to the front row, the row reserved for the deacons and the elders. I sat down. I placed the briefcase on my lap. I folded my hands over it. I looked up at the pulpit. I looked at the microphone stand. The service began. The choir sang. The prayers were said. The atmosphere was thick. Everyone knew something was coming. The tension was like static electricity in the air waiting for a spark. Then Pastor Williams, a good man who didn't know he was being used as a pawn, stepped up. "Brothers and sisters," he said, his voice booming, "today we have a special testimony, a testimony of heartache and the need for healing in our families. Brother Darius has asked to share a burden on his heart." A murmur went through the crowd. Darius stood up. He walked down the aisle. He walked slow, his head bowed. He looked like a martyr. He walked up the steps to the stage. He took the microphone. He looked out at the congregation. He looked at Coretta and Brittany, who were holding hands and sobbing quietly in the second row. Then he looked at me. He took a deep breath. "Brothers and sisters," Darius began, his voice trembling with practiced emotion, "I stand here today a broken man, a father who cannot provide shelter for his child, a husband who watches his wife cry herself to sleep." He paused for effect. "We live in a world where money is worshipped," he continued, "where some men, powerful men, think they can buy people. And when they can't buy you, they try to destroy you." He pointed a shaking finger in my direction, not directly at me, but close enough that everyone knew who he meant. "I have been silent for 20 years, he said, his voice rising. "I have let another man raise my daughter because I was poor, because I thought he could give her a better life. But I didn't know, oh Lord, I didn't know, that his money came with chains. He was good. I had to give him that. He was a con artist, and the church was just another stage. He talked about how I had thrown them out on the street, how I had cut off a young girl's education, how I was hoarding wealth while they had to sleep in a motel. He didn't mention the credit card fraud. He didn't mention the insults. He didn't mention the $5,000 wine. He painted a picture of a tyrant, a king who ate the sheep instead of shepherding them. The congregation was swaying. I could hear the amens and the Lord help us. They were buying it. They were feeling his pain. I sat there, stone still. My hand rested on the latch of my briefcase. Darius was reaching his climax. "I am not asking for money," he shouted, tears streaming down his face now. "I am asking for prayer. I am asking for this man who calls himself a pillar of the church, to open his heart, to remember that we are all God's children, to stop the abuse." He looked at me. "Reggie," he said directly into the mic, "it is not too late. You can fix this. You can do the right thing." The church went silent. Every eye turned to me. 500 people waiting for the old man to break, waiting for me to hang my head in shame, waiting for me to open the checkbook. This was their plan. Public shame, the weapon of the weak against the strong. I didn't hang my head. I stood up. My knees didn't pop this time. I moved with the grace of a predator. I didn't shout from the pew. I walked to the stairs. I walked up onto the stage. Darius looked confused. He stepped back. He hadn't expected this. He expected me to cower. He didn't expect me to invade his territory. I walked up to the pulpit. I stood next to him. I looked at him. He was sweating. I could smell the cheap alcohol seeping out of his pores, masked by mints. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He let it go. He was too stunned to resist. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at the faces of people I had known for 30 years, people I had helped, people I had prayed with. I didn't start with a prayer. I placed my briefcase on the pulpit. The thud echoed through the sound system. I clicked the latches open. Click, click. The sound was like a gun being cocked. Brother Darius wants to talk about truth, I said, my voice deep and calm, filling the sanctuary. He wants to talk about financial oppression. He wants to talk about receipts. I opened the file. Well, I said, pulling out the first stack of papers. Let's talk about receipts. I turned to the audio booth in the back. Deacon, I said, connect my laptop to the screen. Darius's eyes went wide. He looked at Coretta. She had stopped crying. She looked like she was about to be sick. The screen behind the choir came to life, and the service truly began. The sanctuary of Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church was usually a place of peace for me, a refuge where the noise of the world faded into the background of hymns and prayer. But today it felt like a courtroom where the defendant had been gagged and the prosecutor was a liar with a microphone. Darius stood on the pulpit, bathed in the warm glow of the stage lights, looking for all the world like a man broken by the weight of his own repentance. He held the microphone with two hands, bringing it close to his mouth as if he were about to whisper a secret to God himself. Brothers and sisters. Darius began, his voice cracking perfectly on the first syllable. I didn't come here today to cause trouble. I came here because I have nowhere else to turn. The Bible says, ask, and it shall be given, but I have asked. I have begged. I have been on my knees, not just before the Lord, but before a man who holds the keys to my family's survival, and I have been turned away. A ripple of murmurs went through the congregation. I could feel the eyes shifting toward me. I sat in the front row, my back straight, my hands resting on the leather briefcase in my lap. I didn't turn around. I didn't flinch. I let the weight of their judgment settle on my shoulders like a heavy coat. I had worn heavier things. Darius wiped a tear from his cheek. It was a masterful performance. If I didn't know he was a con artist who had spent the last 20 years dodging child support payments, I might have believed him myself. I know I haven't always been the perfect father. Darius continued, his voice gaining strength, finding the rhythm of the preacher. I made mistakes. I fell down. I lost my way. But I came back. I came back for my daughter, Brittany. I came back to make things right. And what did I find? Did I find forgiveness? Did I find an open door? He paused, looking directly at me. His eyes were wet, but behind the tears I saw the glint of malice. No, he shouted suddenly, making the elderly ladies in the choir jump. I found a wall. A wall made of money. A wall built by a man who thinks he can buy people. A man who thinks that because he signed the checks, he owns the souls of my wife and child. The murmurs grew louder. I heard a few amens from the back. People love a redemption story. They love the idea of the prodigal father returning, and they love to hate the rich man who stands in the way of love. Darius knew this. He was playing them like a fiddle. He says he is a pillar of this community, Darius said, pointing a shaking finger at me. He sits in the front row. He writes the big checks for the building fund. But brothers and sisters, what good is a new roof if the heart inside the house is made of stone? What good is charity if you starve your own family? He looked down at the second row where Coretta and Brittany were sitting. They were playing their parts perfectly. Coretta had her head bowed, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Brittany was leaning into her mother, looking small and fragile. They looked like refugees from a war I had started. My daughter is homeless today, Darius cried, his voice breaking into a sob. My wife is sleeping in a motel room with cockroaches because this man threw them out. He evicted them. Why? Because they wanted a relationship with their real father. Because they wanted to be a family again. He is punishing them for loving me. He is using his wealth as a weapon. He is holding the family money hostage, demanding that they choose between food and their father. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It became hostile. I could feel the heat of the stares on the back of my neck. Sister Patterson, who had baked me a sweet potato pie just last Christmas, leaned over to her neighbor and whispered loud enough for me to hear. I never knew he was so cruel. You think you know a person. It hurt. I won't lie. It hurt to hear the people I had worshipped with for 30 years turn on me so quickly. I had paid for the new organ. I had set up the scholarship fund for the youth group anonymously. I had driven the church bus on weekends for free. But none of that mattered now. All they saw was the narrative Darius was spinning. The rich tyrant crushing the poor, repentant father. Darius was on a roll now. He paced the stage, sweating under the lights. He calls himself a Christian, Darius roared. But where is the charity? Where is the grace? He has millions sitting in the bank while his daughter cries herself to sleep. He has a penthouse while we have nothing. He has hardened his heart Pharaoh style. And I am just asking. I am just begging. Let my people go. Let my family be free of your financial chains. He dropped to his knees on the stage. It was the climax of the show. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed into the microphone. The sound was amplified, echoing off the high ceilings. It was grotesque. It was manipulative. It was brilliant. The congregation was in an uproar. People were standing up, craning their necks. Someone shouted, "Help him, Brother King, do the right thing!" Pastor Williams, who had been sitting in his chair behind the pulpit, stood up. He looked uncomfortable. He knew me. He knew my character, but he also knew the mood of his flock. He walked over to Darius and placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to comfort him, trying to bring some order back to the service. Brother Darius, the pastor, said, his voice calm but firm. "We hear your pain. Perhaps we should discuss this in private with the deacons. This is a house of worship, not a court of law." Darius looked up, his face streaked with tears. "No, pastor," he shouted, pulling away. "The truth must be told. The light must shine on the darkness. I cannot be silent anymore." He looked at me again. His eyes locked onto mine. He was challenging me. He was daring me to sit there and take it. He thought that because we were in church, I would be bound by decorum. He thought I would be too ashamed to make a scene. He was wrong. I didn't feel shame. I felt a cold clarity, the kind of clarity you get when you are driving an 18-wheeler down a mountain pass in an ice storm and you realize you have to thread the needle or die. I placed my hands on the armrests of the pew. I pushed myself up. My movements were slow, deliberate. I buttoned my jacket. I picked up the leather briefcase. The sound of the congregation died down. They watched me. They waited for me to walk out. They expected me to flee the judgment. I didn't turn toward the exit. I turned toward the stairs leading to the pulpit. I walked down the aisle. My dress shoes clicked rhythmically on the floor. Click, click, click. It was the only sound in the room. Darius saw me coming. For a split second, the mask slipped. His eyes widened. He looked at the briefcase in my hand, and I saw a flicker of greed mixed with the fear. He probably thought I was bringing a check. He probably thought I was coming to pay him off to stop the humiliation. He stood up, wiping his face. He puffed out his chest, trying to look righteous. "Are you coming to repent?" Reggie Darius asked into the microphone, his voice booming. "Are you coming to ask for forgiveness?" I didn't answer. I kept walking. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. I walked past the choir, who were staring at me with open mouths. I walked past Pastor Williams, who looked like he wanted to intervene but stopped when he saw the look on my face. I walked right up to Darius. Up close, he smelled of stale liquor and desperation masked by too much cologne. He was trembling. He was sweating. He was a small man trying to cast a big shadow. I didn't look angry. I didn't look sad. I looked like a man who was about to sign a bill of lading for a shipment of hazardous materials. I reached out my hand. "Give me the microphone, Darius," I said. My voice wasn't loud. I didn't shout. But the acoustics of the stage carried it. Darius hesitated. He gripped the mic tighter. "You don't have the floor, old man." He sneered away from the mic so only I could hear. "Go sit down before you have a heart attack." I looked at him. I looked deep into his eyes and I let him see the steel underneath the denim. I let him see the man who had built an empire with nothing but grit. I said, "Give me the microphone," I repeated. Pastor Williams stepped forward. Brother Darius let him speak. "If you have made an accusation, he has a right to answer." The congregation murmured in agreement. Fair was fair. Darius looked at the crowd. He realized he couldn't refuse without looking afraid. He sneered at me one last time and shoved the microphone into my hand. "Go ahead," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell them your lies. Tell them why you hate us." He stepped back, standing next to Coretta and Brittany, who had come up to the edge of the stage to support him. They looked like a tableau of victims. Brittany was looking at me with hatred. Coretta was looking at the floor. I watched them for a second. I took a breath. I looked out at the sea of faces. 500 people, friends, neighbors, strangers. They were all judging me. They were all waiting for the villain to speak. I placed the briefcase on the pulpit. It made a heavy, solid sound. Thud. I unlatched the gold clasps. Snap, snap. The sound echoed like gunshots in the silence. I opened the lid. Inside lay the red file, The ledger of 20 years, the receipts of a lifetime of deception. I looked at Darius. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You wanted a testimony, Darius," I said into the microphone, my voice deep and resonant, filling every corner of the church. "You wanted the truth. You wanted to talk about money. You wanted to talk about family." I pulled out a stack of papers. They were stapled together. Colored tabs marked the pages. "Well," I said, "let's talk." I turned to the audio-visual technician in the back booth, a young kid named Marcus who I had helped get into tech school. "Marcus, son," I said, "I need you to plug this laptop into the main screen." I pulled my laptop from the bag. Darius took a step forward. "What are you doing?" "That is private. Public accusations require public evidence," I said, cutting him off. "You opened the door, Darius. Now walk through it." Marcus ran up to the stage and took the laptop. He plugged it into the HDMI cable. Behind the choir, the massive projection screen flickered to life. It was usually used for hymn lyrics and scripture verses. Today it was going to display the gospel of truth. The desktop appeared. I opened the file named The Receipts. The first image appeared on the screen. It was huge. Everyone could see it, even the people in the balcony. It was a bank statement, highlighted in yellow. Darius gasped. Coretta looked up and covered her mouth. I looked at the congregation. "Brother Darius says I hoard my money," I said calmly. "He says I starve my family. He says I kept them from their father." I pointed to the screen. "Let's see how much it cost to keep Brother Darius away for the last 20 years. The show had begun, and the first act was going to be a bloodbath. The projection screen behind the choir loft was usually reserved for lyrics to hymns like Amazing Grace or announcements about the Wednesday night potluck. Today it was displaying a bank statement from Wells Fargo. The font was small but magnified to 20 feet high. It was impossible to miss. The numbers were black and stark against the white background. I stood at the pulpit. My hands were steady. I looked down at Darius, who was standing frozen near the altar rail. His face was a mask of pure terror. He knew what was on that screen. He knew that his performance, his tears, his carefully crafted story of the victimized father was about to be dismantled line by line. I didn't shout. I didn't preach. I didn't need to. The truth has its own volume. "Brother Darius told you he is a poor man," I said, my voice echoing through the silent sanctuary. "He told you he is struggling to provide shelter for his family. He told you I am hoarding wealth while he starves." I pressed a button on the laptop. The image on the screen zoomed in. "Let us look at the record," I continued. "This is a transaction from May 12th of this year. $5,000. Wire transfer to Harley Davidson of Atlanta. The memo says, down payment." A gasp went through the congregation. $5,000 was a lot of money to people who worked hard for every dime. I looked at Brittany. She was staring at the screen, her mouth open. "Do you recognize that date, Brittany?" I asked her gently. "That was the day you told me you needed money for your summer semester tuition. You said the financial aid fell through. You cried in my kitchen. You said you were going to have to drop out." I pointed to the screen. "I wrote a check for $5,000 that morning. I gave it to your mother to deposit into your school account. But it didn't go to the school, did it?" I clicked the button again. A copy of the canceled check appeared. It was endorsed by Coretta King. And below it, the transfer to the motorcycle dealership. "It went to buy a motorcycle for the man who claims he can't afford a motel room," I said. Darius stepped back, shaking his head. "That is a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking. "That is doctored. He is making it up." I ignored him. I clicked the button again. June 15th, I read. $10,000. Spa Castle Resort. 3 days. The platinum package. I looked at Coretta. She was shrinking in her seat, trying to make herself small enough to disappear. "I remember June 15th very well," I said, my voice dropping lower, heavy with the memory. "I was in the hospital. I had a mild heart attack. The doctors were worried. I spent 3 days in the cardiac unit staring at the ceiling, waiting for my wife to come." I paused, letting the words sink in. She told me she was praying. She told me she was on a retreat with the church ladies to pray for my recovery. I turned to the screen. $10,000 for massages and facials while your husband lay in a hospital bed wondering if he was going to die alone. The church was in an uproar now. People were standing up. Sister Patterson was fanning herself furiously. The image of the pious, suffering mother was shattering into 1,000 pieces of expensive glass. But I wasn't done. The money was just the symptom. The disease was deeper. I closed the folder on the laptop. The screen went black for a moment. Then a single image appeared. It wasn't a bank statement, it was a document with a medical seal. Darius says he is the father, I said. He says he came back for his blood. He says I am just the man who paid the bills while he carries the DNA. I picked up the physical envelope from the pulpit. It was old. The paper was yellowed. I had kept it sealed in my safe for 20 years, waiting for a day I hoped would never come. I opened it. The sound of the paper tearing was loud in the microphone. I walked down the steps of the stage. I walked right up to Brittany. She looked terrified. She looked like a child who knows the monster is under the bed. Brittany. I said soft enough that only the front rows could hear, but the microphone carried it to the back. When you were 6 years old, you needed a blood transfusion during surgery. Remember? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. They tested your blood, I said, and they tested mine, and they tested your mother's, and because the doctors were thorough, they asked about your biological father's medical history. I turned to Darius. He was backing away toward the side exit. He looked like a rat looking for a hole. Where are you going, Darius? I asked. Don't you want to hear this? He stopped. He couldn't leave. The deacons were blocking the aisle. Coretta told me Darius was your father, I said to Brittany. She swore it on a stack of Bibles. She said he was a bad man, but he gave you life. I held up the document. But science doesn't lie, and medical records don't forget. I turned back to the screen. The document was projected now. It was a fertility report from 1998. The patient's name was Darius Jones. The diagnosis was clear: sterile, azoospermia, impossible to conceive naturally. The church went dead silent. It was a silence so profound you could hear the hum of the electric lights. Darius isn't your father, Brittany? I said, my voice breaking for the first time. He never was. He couldn't be. Brittany looked at the screen. She read the words. She looked at Darius. Is this true? She whispered. Darius didn't answer. He was looking at the floor, his face gray. He isn't your father, I repeated. And he knew it. And your mother knew it. I looked at Coretta. She was sobbing into her hands, her shoulders shaking. Who is he then? Brittany screamed. Her voice was raw, tearing at her throat. Who is he? I will tell you who he is, I said. He is an ex-boyfriend. He is a man your mother dated before she met me. He is a man who found out you existed and saw an opportunity. He saw a wealthy stepfather and a guilty mother, and he realized he could play the role of the long-lost dad to get a payout. I walked back to the pulpit. I leaned on it heavily. I felt tired. Tired of the lies. Tired of the burden. I knew, I said. I knew 6 months after we got married. I found the papers. I hired an investigator. I knew he wasn't your father. Brittany looked up at me. Her eyes were full of betrayal. Then why, she asked, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe? Because I loved you, I said simply. Because you were a little girl who wanted a daddy. And I was the one there. I was the one tucking you in. I was the one teaching you to drive. I didn't want to break your heart. I didn't want you to know that your mother lied to you. I didn't want you to know that the man you idolized was a fraud who was incapable of creating you. I took a breath. So I paid him. For 20 years I paid him to stay away. I paid him to play the role of the distant father so you wouldn't feel abandoned. Every birthday card you got from him, I bought it. I wrote it. I mailed it. Every present, I picked it out. I wanted you to have a father, Brittany, even if I had to buy him for you. The congregation was weeping. I saw grown men wiping their eyes. They saw the sacrifice. They saw the tragedy of a man who loved a child so much, he protected her from the truth of her own origin. But yesterday I continued, my voice hardening again. Yesterday, you told me I wasn't your father. You told me I was just the wallet. You chose him. You chose the man I bought for you over the man who raised you. I looked at Darius. And you, Darius. You took the money. You took the motorcycle. You took the clothes. And then you stood on this holy ground and tried to destroy my name. You tried to turn my community against me. Darius looked up. His eyes were wild. She lied to me too, he shouted, pointing at Coretta. She told me the kid was mine. I didn't know I was sterile. That doctor is a liar. Coretta stood up then. She looked like a ghost. Stop it, she screamed. Just stop it, Darius. You knew. You always knew. We planned it. The final nail. The confession. Coretta looked at Brittany. We needed the money, baby, she sobbed. Reggie had so much. And Darius knew how to spend it. We thought We thought if you loved him, Reggie would keep paying to keep him happy." Brittany stood up. She looked at her mother. She looked at the man she thought was her father. She looked at the screen with the receipts and the medical report. She looked at me. Her face crumbled. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that was left was a broken young woman standing in the ruins of her life. I stepped down from the pulpit. I closed the briefcase. I unplugged the laptop. The screen went dark. The show was over. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I walked down the aisle. The people in the pews stood up as I passed. They didn't whisper. They didn't judge. They looked at me with respect. They saw a man who had carried a cross for 20 years and finally laid it down. I walked past Darius, who was now arguing with Coretta in hushed, vicious tones. I walked past Brittany, who was standing alone in the aisle staring at nothing. I walked out of the church into the bright Sunday sun. The air was fresh. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful day. I got into my car. I put the briefcase on the passenger seat. I didn't feel happy. You don't feel happy when you cut off a limb to save your life. You just feel pain and relief. But I knew one thing. The truth had spoken, and it had said goodbye. The sound that filled the sanctuary wasn't a hymn, and it wasn't a prayer. It was a collective gasp of 500 people realizing they had been witnessing a crime scene, not a testimony. The air left the room. The projection on the screen of the fertility report loomed over us like a divine judgment. Sterile. The word seemed to pulse in the air. Azoospermia. It was a medical term, but in that moment it was a sentence of life imprisonment for the lies my family had told. I stood at the pulpit looking down at the wreckage I had just caused. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heavy. It is a terrible thing to break a person even when that person needs breaking. Brittany was the first to fall. She didn't faint in the theatrical way Coretta would have done. She simply collapsed as if the bones in her legs had turned to water. She sank to the carpeted floor of the aisle, her expensive dress pooling around her. She stared up at Darius, the man she had fought for, the man she had insulted me for, the man she had called her real father. She looked at him, and for the first time in 20 years, she saw him. She didn't see the charming rogue or the misunderstood victim. She saw a stranger. She saw a biological dead end. She saw a man who had taken my money to play a role and had played it so well he convinced even himself. "You aren't him," she whispered. Her voice was small, lost in the cavernous room, but the silence was so absolute that we all heard it. "You aren't my dad." Darius looked around wildly. His eyes were darting from the screen to the congregation to me. He was like an animal caught in a trap, chewing off its own leg to escape. The narrative he had built, the story of the victimized father, the crusader for family rights, it had all evaporated in the light of a single PDF document. He looked at the faces in the pews. Sister Patterson was covering her mouth with a gloved hand, shaking her head in disgust. The deacons were standing up, their faces grim. The sympathy had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard revulsion. Darius couldn't attack the evidence, so he decided to attack the messenger. The shame was too much for him to process, so he converted it instantly into rage. Pure, unadulterated violence. It is the last refuge of a man with no arguments left. "You old devil," Darius screamed. The sound tore through his throat, raw and animalistic. "You think you can do this to me? You think you can humiliate me in front of God and everybody?" He didn't look at Brittany huddled on the floor. He didn't look at Coretta, who was sobbing into her hands, rocking back and forth in the pew. He looked at me. I was the architect of his destruction, and he wanted blood. "I will kill you," Darius roared. "I will kill you with my bare hands." He charged. He leaped up the stairs to the pulpit, moving faster than I had ever seen him move. His hands were curled into claws, his face twisted into a mask of hatred that made him look demonic under the stage lights. I didn't move. I didn't step back. I didn't raise my hands to defend myself. I stood my ground, gripping the sides of the wooden pulpit. I had faced down union busters with baseball bats in the 80s. I had faced down hijackers on the interstate. I wasn't going to run from a man wearing a suit I paid for. But I didn't have to fight. Before Darius could get within striking distance, a wall of muscle materialized between us. It wasn't the police. It wasn't hired security. It was the Brotherhood. Deacon Mosley moved first. He was 60 years old, but he had spent 40 of those years lifting steel beams. He stepped in front of Darius like a sliding door closing. Brother Jerome, a former linebacker who now ran the youth ministry, stepped up beside him. And then came Big Tiny, the head usher, who was 6'5" and wide as a doorway. They didn't strike Darius, they didn't hit him, they simply absorbed him. They formed a human barricade of black suits and solemn faces. Darius slammed into Deacon Mosley's chest and bounced off. He flailed, trying to reach around them, trying to get to me. "Get out of my way!" he screamed, spitting saliva. "He ruined my life. He is a liar. That document is fake. Let me get him." Deacon Mosley grabbed Darius by the shoulders. His hands were like vices. He didn't shake him. He just held him still. Son Mosley said, his voice deep and calm, a stark contrast to Darius's hysteria. "You have done enough talking for today. You are in the Lord's house, and you are disrespecting a man who has fed you for 20 years. "Let me go!" Darius shrieked, struggling uselessly against the grip of 3 men who worked for a living. "You need to calm down," Brother Jerome said, grabbing Darius's other arm. "Before you make a mistake you can't come back from." I watched from behind the wall of my friends. I watched the man who wanted to be king crumble into a heap of impotent rage. He wasn't a father. He wasn't a provider. He was just a small, angry man who had run out of lies. Coretta finally looked up. She saw her lover trying to attack her husband. She saw the medical report burning on the screen above us. She saw the ruin of her social standing. She stood up, legs shaking. "Darius, stop," she wailed. "Please, just stop." Darius turned his head to look at her. The hatred in his eyes shifted targets. "You told me," he shouted at her. "You told me she was mine. You swore it. You lied to me too, Coretta. You made me look like a fool." Coretta shrank back. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I didn't know that you couldn't. You knew," I said. My voice cut through the chaos, magnified by the microphone I still stood near. They all stopped. Darius stopped struggling. Coretta stopped crying. Brittany looked up from the floor. "You knew, Coretta," I said. "I told you in 1999, when the report came back. I showed it to you in our kitchen. You cried then too. You said it didn't matter. You said we would raise her together. You said we would protect her." I looked at Brittany. "Your mother knew," I said gently. "She knew Darius couldn't be your father, but she kept him around. She kept the lie alive. Why? Because she needed a backup plan. She needed leverage. She needed a way to keep me insecure, to keep me paying, to keep me trying to buy her love." Coretta shook her head violently. "No, Reggie, no, I loved you. You loved the lifestyle," I said. "And you loved the drama. You loved having 2 men fighting for you, one with a checkbook and one with a motorcycle. Well, Coretta, the fight is over." I stepped out from behind the deacons. I stood on the edge of the stage looking down at them, looking down at the family I had built on a foundation of sand. I looked at the congregation. They were silent now, waiting. They had seen the receipts, they had seen the DNA, they had seen the violence. The verdict was in their eyes. They weren't judging me anymore. They were mourning with me. They were witnessing the death of a good man's patience. I took a deep breath. The air in the church smelled of floor wax and old hymnals and the faint metallic scent of adrenaline. For 20 years, I said, my voice steady, carrying to the back of the balcony. For 20 years, I have carried this family. I have carried their debts. I have carried their secrets. I have carried their disrespect. I thought that was my job. I thought that was what a man did. He carries the load. I looked at Brittany. She was weeping silently now, looking at me with eyes that were begging for something. Forgiveness, a solution. A check I didn't know. And for the first time, I didn't care. I thought if I carried it long enough, I said, if I carried it far enough, eventually you would appreciate the journey. Eventually you would look at the driver and say thank you. I paused. But you didn't. You spat on the driver. You tried to hijack the truck. And you tried to throw me out of the cab. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a handkerchief. I wiped my hands slowly, deliberately. It was a symbolic gesture, but everyone in the room understood it. It was biblical. It was final. "I am done carrying it," I said. I looked at Darius, held firm by the deacons. I looked at Coretta, trembling in the pew. I looked at Brittany, broken on the floor. "I wash my hands of you," I said. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "I wash my hands of the lies," I continued. "I wash my hands of the debts. I wash my hands of the ungratefulness. From this moment on, you are on your own. You have your real father, Brittany. You have your lover, Coretta. And Darius, you have your freedom." I pointed to the door. the big double oak doors at the back of the sanctuary that led out into the parking lot, into the real world, into the cold, hard Sunday afternoon. Go, I said. Take your drama, take your lies, and go. Darius slumped in the grip of the deacons. The fight went out of him. He realized there was no money coming, there was no settlement, there was only the exit. Let him go, I said to the deacons. Mosley and Jerome released him. Darius stumbled, straightening his jacket. He looked around the church. He saw 500 faces turned against him. He saw no allies. He saw no sympathy. He looked at me one last time. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe a curse, maybe a plea, but nothing came out. He turned and walked down the aisle. He walked fast, head down. Coretta looked at me. Reggie, please, where will we go? I don't know, I said. And that is the beauty of it, Coretta. It is not my problem to solve anymore. She let out a sob and ran after Darius. Brittany was the last to move. She stood up shakily. She looked at the screen where the medical report still glowed, proving she was an orphan of her own making. She looked at me. Reggie, she whispered. Dad. No, I said, cutting her off. You made your choice. You said I was never your father. You were right. I was just the angel investor, and the funding has been pulled. She flinched as if I had hit her. She turned and ran down the aisle, her flat slapping against the carpet, chasing after the biological lie she had chosen over the man who raised her. I watched them go. I watched the doors swing shut behind them. The church was silent. Then from the back row, someone started to clap, a slow, rhythmic clap, then another, then another. It wasn't applause for a show. It was applause for a survivor. It was the sound of a community telling a man that he had done the right thing, that he was free. I closed my briefcase. I picked it up. I walked down the steps. I didn't look back at the screen. I didn't look back at the empty pew where my family used to sit. I walked out of the sanctuary. I walked out of the church. I walked to my car. I was alone. But as I sat in the driver's seat and turned the key, I realized something. The air was lighter. The sun was brighter. The heavy load I had been hauling for 20 years was gone. I dropped the trailer, and I was ready to drive bobtail into the rest of my life. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel flickered with a buzzing sound that sounded like a dying fly. It was one of those places off the interstate where the sheets are thin and the neighbors don't ask questions. This was where my family had retreated after the disaster at the church. It was a long way down from the penthouse at King Tower. I wasn't there physically, but I had eyes on the ground. Jamal, my attorney and oldest friend, was there. And Jamal didn't miss a thing. It was 9 a.m. on Monday. The checkout time was 11. Coretta and Brittany were in room 112. The Mercedes, the sleek black S-Class that I had paid cash for, sat outside collecting dust from the highway. It looked like a diamond sitting in a gutter. It didn't belong there, and neither did they really. They belonged in a world of illusion, and that world had just been foreclosed on. Jamal pulled up in his town car. He stepped out, adjusting his tie. He carried a briefcase similar to the one I had used in church, but his was filled with legal eviction notices and asset recovery orders. He walked to door 112 and knocked. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the knock of reality coming to collect. The door opened a crack. I could imagine Coretta peering out her face, devoid of makeup, her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw Jamal, she probably felt a spark of hope. She probably thought I had sent him to negotiate a truce, to offer a settlement, to bring them home. She opened the door wider. Jamal, she said, her voice raspy. Did Reggie send you? Is he ready to talk? Jamal didn't smile. He didn't step inside. He stood on the concrete walkway holding his ground. Mr. King has nothing to say to you, Coretta, Jamal said, his voice professional and cold. I am here to execute the recovery of assets belonging to King Logistics and its subsidiaries. Coretta frowned, confused. Recovery of assets. What are you talking about? We just need to go home. We need to get our things. Brittany appeared behind her mother. She was wearing a tracksuit she must have dug out of the trunk of the car. She looked angry. She looked like she was still waiting for the world to apologize to her. Tell him to stop playing games, Brittany snapped. We are tired. We want to go back to the apartment. Jamal opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document stamped with the court seal. You cannot go back to the apartment, Jamal stated. The penthouse is the property of King Real Estate Holdings, a subsidiary of Mr. King's primary corporation. As of this morning, the locks have been changed. The security codes have been wiped. Your access privileges have been permanently revoked." "What?" Coretta shrieked, clutching the doorframe. "My clothes are in there. My jewelry, my life." "Your clothes and jewelry were purchased with misappropriated funds," Jamal explained calmly. "We are conducting a forensic audit. Until that is complete, the contents of the apartment are considered evidence in a fraud investigation. Nothing leaves that building." He handed her the paper. She stared at it, her hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. "You can't do this," she whispered. "It is illegal." "It is perfectly legal," Jamal countered. "You were guests. Guests who committed fraud against the host. Your tenancy was at will, and the will is gone." He turned his gaze to the parking lot, to the black Mercedes. "And that brings us to the vehicle," he said. Brittany stepped forward aggressively. "That is my car," she said. "Reggie gave it to me for my birthday." "He allowed you to use it," Jamal corrected. "The title is in the name of the company. It is a fleet vehicle, and the fleet manager has ordered a recall." He held out his hand, palm up, expectant. "The keys, Brittany," he said. "No." Brittany yelled. "No, I am not giving you the car. How are we supposed to get around? How are we supposed to live?" "That is not my concern," Jamal said. "Nor is it Mr. King's. You have claimed that Darius is your father. Perhaps he can provide transportation." The mention of Darius made Coretta flinch. She looked around the parking lot as if expecting him to materialize, but Darius was gone. He had vanished the moment we left the church, probably halfway to the state line by now, looking for the next mark. "I am not giving you the keys," Brittany screamed, clutching her pocket. Jamal sighed. He pulled out his phone. "I have a tow truck waiting around the corner," he said, "and I have the local police on speed dial. We can do this the easy way where you hand me the keys and retrieve your personal items from the trunk. Or we can do it the hard way where you are arrested for grand theft auto. The choice is yours." Brittany looked at her mother. She looked at the car. She looked at Jamal. She saw the end of the road. There was no maneuvering room left. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the key fob. She threw it at Jamal. It hit him in the chest and fell to the concrete. "I hate him," she hissed. "Tell him I hate him." "He knows," Jamal said, bending down to pick up the key, "and he is fine with that." He walked over to the car. He unlocked it. He popped the trunk. "Get your bags," he ordered. "You have 2 minutes." They dragged their suitcases out of the trunk. The suitcases I had bought them for a trip to Paris we never took. They stood on the dirty pavement surrounding by their luggage, looking like castaways on a concrete island. Jamal closed the trunk. He got into the Mercedes. He started the engine. The powerful purr of the motor sounded like a taunt. "Wait!" Coretta shouted, running up to the window. "Jamal, wait!" He rolled the window down an inch. "What about the money?" she asked, desperate now. "The joint savings, the emergency fund. I tried to access it online, but it says 0. Did Reggie take that too? Did he leave me with nothing?" Jamal looked at her. For the first time, his expression softened slightly, not with kindness, but with a brutal sort of pity. "Reggie didn't touch your personal savings, Coretta," he said. "He didn't touch the joint account you set up with your husband." "Then where is it?" she cried. "It had $50,000 in it. My nest egg." "Where is it?" Jamal reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a court order. It was a transaction receipt. "You should ask your partner about that," Jamal said, sliding the paper through the crack in the window. Coretta grabbed it. She unfolded it. Brittany looked over her shoulder. "I wasn't there, but I knew what it said. I had seen the alert on the system the night before. Transaction type wire transfer. Amount $52,000. Recipient Crystal Palace Casino and Resort, Bahamas. Authorized by Darius Jones." Coretta stared at the paper. Her knees gave out. She slumped against the side of the car, sliding down until she hit the pavement. "He took it," she whispered. "He took it all. He had the password," Jamal said, his voice flat. "You gave it to him, Coretta. You gave him access to everything because you thought you were building a life with him. You thought you were conspiring against Reggie together. But Darius doesn't have partners. He has victims." Brittany snatched the paper from her mother's hand. She read it. Her face twisted. "He stole our money," she screamed. "That was my money too. He said he was going to invest it for my brand." "He invested it all right," Jamal said. "In a one-way ticket and a suite in Nassau. He left last night." "Coretta," He cleared the account an hour after the church service. He didn't even go back to the motel. Coretta let out a wail that echoed off the metal siding of the motel units. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had traded a diamond for a piece of glass, and the glass had just shattered in her hand. "He left me," she sobbed. "He left me with nothing. He left you exactly where you started," Jamal said. He put the car in gear. "Goodbye, ladies," he said. He drove away. The Mercedes, followed by his town car, pulled out of the lot and merged onto the highway, heading back to the city, back to the tower, back to me. Coretta and Brittany were left in the parking lot. The wind blew a plastic bag across the asphalt. It caught on Coretta's shoe. They had no car, they had no home, they had no credit cards, and the $50,000 they thought was their escape hatch was currently sitting at a blackjack table in the Caribbean. Brittany looked down at her mother sitting on the ground weeping. "This is your fault," Brittany said, her voice cold and venomous. "You brought him back. You told me to trust him. You said Reggie was the problem." Coretta looked up, her mascara running down her face in black rivulets. "We are in this together," she whispered. "No," Brittany said, stepping back. "We are not." "You chose him. I just wanted a father." She kicked her suitcase. "Now look at us. We are trash. Just like he said." She sat down on her suitcase and put her head in her hands. And 10 miles away in my office, I watched the GPS tracker on the Mercedes moving steadily toward home. I closed the file on the desktop. The asset recovery was complete. They were stripped down to the studs. The veneer was gone. Now they would have to find out if there was anything structurally sound underneath the lies. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. I didn't feel happy. You don't feel happy when you watch a demolition, but you feel a sense of order returning. The chaos was gone. The parasites had been removed. Now I just had to wait for the dust to settle. The afternoon sun beat down on the cracked pavement of the Starlight Motel parking lot, creating heat waves that shimmered like mirages. Inside room 112, the air conditioner rattled and coughed, trying desperately to cool air that was thick with panic and recrimination. I was not there sitting on the stained bedspread, but I knew the scene as if I were watching it through a camera lens. I knew the players. I knew their desperate hope. And I knew exactly what was coming down the highway to crush it. Brittany sat on the edge of the bed staring at her phone. The battery was dying just like her future. She was waiting for a call. She was waiting for a text. She was waiting for Liam. In her mind, the narrative was already shifting. She was convincing herself that Liam was the hero of this story. He had paid for the dinner, hadn't he? He had driven them home. He was a sterling. He had resources. He would understand that she was a victim of a crazy stepfather and a thief of a biological father. She convinced herself that love would conquer the bank statements. She stood up and paced the small room. Her expensive shoes clicked on the cheap linoleum. Coretta sat in the corner, still weeping softly, her face buried in her hands. "He will come," Brittany said, her voice tight. "He loves me, Mom. He knows I didn't steal that money. He knows Darius tricked us. Liam will fix this. He will get us a hotel. He will talk to his lawyers. We just have to explain it right." Coretta looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "He saw everything, Brittany. He saw the DNA report. He saw the receipts. He saw us get kicked out of the church." "That was Reggie's show," Brittany snapped. "Reggie manipulated the facts. Liam is smart. He will see through it. He knows who I really am." The sound of a heavy engine outside made them both freeze. It wasn't the rattle of a tow truck. It was the deep, throaty purr of a luxury engine, a Range Rover. Brittany ran to the window. She pulled back the grimy curtain. "It is him," she breathed. I told you he would come." She frantically tried to smooth her hair. She pinched her cheeks to bring back some color. She looked at her reflection in the darkened TV screen. She saw a survivor. She saw a future billionaire's wife. The knock on the door was firm. 3 solid raps. Brittany flew to the door. She threw it open. Liam stood there. He was still wearing the tuxedo shirt from the night before, but he had lost the tie and the jacket. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had grown up 10 years in 10 hours. He didn't step inside. He stood on the threshold, the bright sunlight framing him like an angel of mercy. "Liam," Brittany cried, throwing her arms around his neck. "Oh, thank God." I knew you wouldn't leave me here. It has been a nightmare. Reggie is insane. He took everything. Liam didn't hug her back. He stood rigid, his arms at his sides. He waited for her to finish. He waited for her to pull back, confused by his lack of response. "Can we go?" she asked, looking past him to the car. "I can't stay here another minute." Liam stepped into the room then. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the light. The room felt suddenly smaller. "We aren't going anywhere," Brittany, Liam said. His voice was flat, devoid of warmth, devoid of anger. It was business. Brittany's smile faltered. "What do you mean? You can't mean you want to stay here. I mean, I am not taking you anywhere," Liam clarified. "I came to retrieve something, and to deliver a message." Brittany took a step back. A cold knot of dread began to form in her stomach. Retrieve something. Liam looked at her hand, specifically at her left hand, at the ring finger. "The ring," he said. Brittany covered her hand instinctively. Her eyes went wide. "What? No, Liam, this is just a fight. Couples fight. Families have drama. You can't be serious." "I have never been more serious in my life," Liam said. He walked past her and looked at Coretta. He looked at the suitcases piled on the floor. He looked at the wreckage of their lives. "I spoke to my father this morning," Liam said. "We had a long conversation. About business, about character, about the merger of families." Brittany latched onto that word. Merger. "Yes, the merger," she said, desperate. "Our families. The Sterlings and, well, me." "Your family is a fraud," Liam said. "And my father, he is a man of particular principles." Liam turned back to Brittany. He looked her in the eye. "He told me about Reggie King," Liam said. "He told me that 20 years ago Reggie King saved a Sterling shipment from being hijacked. He stood in front of a truck with a tire iron and held off 3 men until the police arrived. My father said Reggie King is the only man in this city whose handshake is worth more than a contract." Brittany shook her head. "That doesn't matter. That is ancient history." "It matters to us," Liam said, his voice rising slightly. "It matters because you spent the last year telling me he was garbage. You told me he was a burden. You mocked him. You disrespected him in his own home. You tried to destroy a man my family considers a hero." He took a breath, steadying himself. "My father does not accept a family that lies and disrespects elders like that," he quoted. "Especially not with Mr. King. We do business with people of integrity, Brittany. And you and your mother and that man Darius, you have none." The words hung in the stale air of the motel room. Integrity. It was a currency Brittany had never traded in. She didn't understand its value until she realized she was bankrupt without it. "Liam, please," she begged, grabbing his hand. "I can change. I can apologize. I will go to Reggie. I will beg him. I will do whatever you want. Just don't leave me. Not like this. Not when I have nothing." Liam looked at her hand gripping his. He looked at the diamond ring. A 3-carat solitaire. Flawless. It cost $40,000. It was worth more than everything else in the room combined. "You don't want me," Brittany, Liam said softly. "You want the lifestyle. You want the name. You want the safety. You proved that last night. You sat there and let your father order $10,000 worth of wine on a card you knew wasn't his. You watched him humiliate Reggie and you smiled. You aren't a victim. You are an accomplice." He pulled his hand away. He held out his palm. "The ring, Brittany. Now." Brittany looked at the ring. It was her last lifeline. If she gave it up, she was admitting it was over. She was admitting that the fairy tale had turned into a horror story. "No," she whispered, clutching her hand to her chest. Liam didn't move. He didn't threaten. He just waited. "If you make me call the police to report it stolen, it will be just another charge on the list," Liam said. "Grand theft. Fraud. Do you really want to add to the collection?" Brittany looked at her mother. Coretta was staring at the wall, vacantly broken. There was no help coming from that corner. Slowly, painfully, Brittany slid the ring off her finger. It felt like she was pulling off her own skin. She placed it in Liam's hand. The metal was warm. Liam looked at it. He didn't look happy. He looked relieved. He put it in his pocket. "The wedding is off," he said. "My lawyers will contact you regarding the cancellation fees. Do not contact me. Do not come to my office. Do not come to my house." He turned to the door. "Liam," Brittany screamed. "You can't leave me here. I have no car. I have no money." "That seems to be the theme of the day," Liam set his hand on the doorknob. "Maybe you should call your real father. I hear the weather in the Bahamas is nice this time of year." He opened the door. The heat rushed in. "One more thing," Liam said, pausing. He looked back at them. "I stopped by King Tower on my way here. I wanted to apologize to Reggie personally." Brittany held her breath. "He wouldn't see me," Liam said. "Security said he gave orders. No Sterlings, no Joneses, no Kings." He washed his hands of all of us. Liam looked at Brittany with a finality that was absolute. "You cost me a relationship with a legend," he said. "That is the only thing I regret." He walked out. He closed the door. Brittany stood there. She heard the Range Rover start. She heard the gravel crunch as it pulled away. She heard the silence rush back in to fill the void. She ran to the window. She watched the taillights disappear onto the highway. She was alone. Truly alone. Her biological father was a thief who had stolen her nest egg and run to an island. Her stepfather, the man who had loved her and protected her, was a millionaire who had locked the gates. Her fiancé, the man who was supposed to be her ticket to the high life, had just repossessed the symbol of their future. She had played the game. She had bet everything on the lie. And the house had won. She turned to Coretta. The rage that had been building all morning finally exploded. It wasn't directed at me. It wasn't directed at Liam. It was directed at the only person left in the room. "You told me to trust him," Brittany screamed at her mother. "You told me Darius was the answer. You told me Reggie was holding me back." Coretta looked up, her eyes hollow. "I thought," she whispered. "You didn't think," Brittany shrieked, picking up a pillow and throwing it at the wall. "You just wanted to be young again. You wanted the bad boy, and you dragged me down with you." She looked around the motel room, the peeling wallpaper, the stained carpet, the buzzing fly. "I am a Sterling," she whispered to herself, rocking back and forth. "I was supposed to be a Sterling. Now she was just a Jones, the daughter of a thief, the stepdaughter of a ghost." She sat on the edge of the bed where Liam had sat. She looked at her bare finger. The tan line where the ring used to be was faint, fading already. She had lost the past. She had lost the present. And she had definitely lost the future. And somewhere in the city in a tower she couldn't enter, the man she had called a nobody was drinking coffee and watching the sun set over a kingdom she had exiled herself from. She put her head in her hands, and for the first time in her life she cried tears that weren't for show. She cried because she finally understood the math. 0 multiplied by anything is still 0. The descent wasn't a slide, it was a free fall. It had been 48 hours since the church service, and 24 hours since the assets were seized. The Starlight Motel, which had seemed like a dungeon, was now a palace they couldn't afford. The manager, a man with grease under his fingernails and no sympathy in his heart, kicked them out at noon sharp when the credit card Brittany tried to use came back declined for the 10th time. They stood on the sidewalk with their suitcases, the only remnants of a life that had evaporated. Coretta was wearing the same dress she had worn to church, now wrinkled and stained with sweat. Brittany was in her tracksuit, looking like a refugee from a fashion magazine that had gone out of business. They had $80 in cash between them, $80 to start a new life. I wasn't there to see them drag their luggage to the bus stop, but I knew the route. I knew where people went when the city chewed them up and spit them out. They ended up at a weekly rental place on the south side, a building that smelled of boiled cabbage and despair, where the walls were paper thin and the sirens never stopped wailing. It was the kind of place where I had started 50 years ago, the kind of place I had worked 18 hours a day to make sure they never had to see. They sat on the sagging twin beds in a room that was smaller than my walk-in closet. The air conditioner was broken. The window looked out onto a brick wall. "This is it," Coretta whispered, staring at the peeling paint on the ceiling. "This is where we live." It didn't take long for the shock to turn into venom. When you trap 2 rats in a cage with no food, they don't work together. They eat each other. Brittany threw her empty purse against the wall. "This is your fault," she screamed. Her voice was raw, scraping against the silence. "You and your obsession with him, you and your need for a bad boy. You brought him back into our lives, Mom. We had everything. We had the penthouse. We had the credit cards. We had Reggie." Coretta sat up, her eyes flashing. "Don't you dare blame me," she snapped. "I did this for us. I did this to secure our future." Darius was supposed to be the bridge to what Brittany laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound, to this, to a Roach Motel. "He stole the money, Mom. He stole the $50,000 you saved. He stole my future, and you let him. You gave him the passwords. You gave him the keys. You were so desperate to be young again, you sold me out." "I didn't sell you out," Coretta yelled, standing up. I tried to give you a father, a real father. I had a father, Brittany shouted back. I had a father who paid for my college. I had a father who bought me a car. I had a father who never missed a birthday, and you told me he was garbage. You told me he was a wallet. You poisoned me against the only man who ever actually gave a damn about us. Coretta flinched. She knew it was true, but she couldn't admit it. Admitting it meant looking in the mirror and seeing a monster. You didn't have to insult him at the dinner, Coretta countered, pointing a shaking finger. You didn't have to say those things to Liam. You were the one who got greedy, Brittany. You wanted the sterling so bad you forgot who was paying the tab. If you had just kept your mouth shut and played the game, we would still be in the penthouse. We would still have the cars. You broke the golden goose. I didn't break him, Brittany spat. I exposed him, and he destroyed us for it. He taught us a lesson, Coretta whispered, sinking back onto the bed. He warned us. He always said he was a businessman. We just forgot that meant he keeps score. The fighting didn't fill their stomachs. By the second day, the $80 was gone, spent on the deposit for the room and cheap takeout. Hunger is a powerful motivator. It strips away pride faster than any lecture. It forces you to look at your hands not as accessories for jewelry, but as tools for survival. They needed money. And for the first time in their lives, they couldn't call me. They couldn't call Darius. They couldn't call Liam. They had to call the world. They walked 3 miles to the industrial district. It was an area I knew well. It was where the trucks parked. It was where the diners stayed open 24 hours to feed the men and women who moved the country. They walked into a place called Sal's Diner. It was a greasy spoon where the coffee was strong and the floors were sticky. The sign in the window said, "Help Wanted." I imagined the manager, a guy named Sal, who had forearms like tree trunks looking at them. Coretta in her stained church dress. Brittany in her designer tracksuit. They looked like aliens. "We need work," Coretta said, her voice trembling. "What can you do?" Sal asked, wiping the counter with a rag that was gray with age. "Can you cook?" "No," Coretta said. "Can you wait tables?" I have hosted dinner parties," Coretta offered, trying to summon a shred of dignity. Sal laughed. "This ain't a dinner party, lady. This is a feeding trough. You carry plates, you wipe tables, and you don't drop nothing. $11 an hour plus tips." He looked at Brittany. "What about you, princess?" Brittany looked at her nails. The manicure was chipping. "I can handle the register," she said. Sal shook his head. "Register is for family. You can wash dishes." "Dishwasher." Brittany looked at the kitchen door. Steam and noise poured out of it. It smelled of old grease and onions. "I don't wash dishes," she said. "Then you don't eat," Sal said, turning his back. They took the jobs. I wasn't there to see it, but I know the rhythm of a kitchen. I know the heat. I know the way the water in the sink turns gray and lukewarm after an hour. I know the way your back screams after standing on concrete for a shift. Brittany stood at the sink. Her hands, the hands that had only ever held phones and wine glasses, were plunged into soapy water. She scrubbed plates with encrusted eggs. She scraped congealed gravy. The steam ruined her hair. The water ruined her skin. She broke a nail in the first 10 minutes. She cried silently, her tears mixing with the dishwater. She looked out the serving window. She saw men eating, men who looked like me, men in flannel shirts and work boots, men with calloused hands. She had spent her life looking down on them, calling them simple, calling them nobody. Now she was cleaning up after them. Coretta wasn't doing much better. She was trying to balance 3 plates on her arm. She dropped a glass. It shattered. The sound silenced the diner. "Hey, watch it!" Sal shouted from the grill. "That comes out of your pay." Coretta bent down to pick up the shards. Her knees popped. Her back ached. She remembered the spa days. She remembered the massages I had paid for. She remembered the housekeeper who used to clean up her messes. She looked at a customer in booth 4. He was a truck driver. He was reading a newspaper, drinking coffee. He looked a little like me from the back. Coretta froze. For a second, she thought I had come to save them. She thought I was there to write a check and take them home. The man turned around. It wasn't me. It was just a stranger. Coretta felt a wave of despair so deep it almost knocked her over. She realized then that there was no savior. There was no magic card. There was only the work. They finished their shift at midnight. They walked out the back door smelling of fried onions and bleach. They had earned $88 between them before taxes. $88. Brittany looked at the cash in her hand. It was a few crumpled bills. It wasn't enough for a lipstick. It wasn't enough for a cocktail at Le Ciel. It was barely enough to keep the room for another night and buy a sandwich. She looked at her hands. They were red and raw. "Is this it?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Is this our life now?" Coretta leaned against the brick wall of the alley. She was too tired to fight, too tired to lie. "This is what life costs, Brittany," she said. "This is what Reggie did every day for 40 years, so we didn't have to." Brittany looked at the bills again. She thought about the $15,000 dinner. She thought about the $5,000 wine. She thought about the $80,000 car. "We burned it," she whispered. "We took a pile of gold and we set it on fire because we wanted to look cool for people who didn't care about us." They walked back to the room in the dark. They walked past the Mercedes dealership where the cars gleamed behind the glass. They walked past the high-rise buildings where the lights were golden and warm. They were on the outside now. They were looking in. They got back to the room. They ate a cold sandwich sitting on the bed. They didn't talk. They didn't fight. They were too exhausted. Brittany took off her shoes. Her feet were blistered. She curled up on the thin mattress. She closed her eyes. She tried to dream of Liam. She tried to dream of the wedding, but all she could see was the sink. All she could smell was the grease. And all she could hear was my voice saying, "I wash my hands of you." She realized then that my hands were clean. They were clean because I had washed them. But her hands were dirty. And no matter how much she scrubbed, the stain of her own ingratitude wasn't coming off. The lesson had moved from the classroom to the field, and the field was unforgiving. 6 months is a long time in the logistics business. In 6 months, you can build a new distribution hub, you can map out 1,000 new routes, or you can completely rebuild a life that had been stripped down to the chassis. It was a crisp October afternoon, the kind where the air smells like wood smoke and dried leaves. I was sitting on the terrace of my new property, a villa about 40 minutes outside the city. It wasn't a penthouse in the sky anymore. It was 5 acres of land with oak trees that were older than the country itself. It was quiet. It was solid. It was mine. Across the table from me sat Richard Sterling. We weren't talking business. We weren't talking about supply chains or market volatility. We were playing chess. The board sat between us, a battlefield of ebony and ivory pieces. Richard was a good player, aggressive and sharp, but he telegraphed his moves if you watched his eyes. "You are going to lose that night, Richard," I said, taking a sip of my iced tea. He chuckled, leaning back in his garden chair. He looked relaxed. Since Liam had called off the wedding and dodged the bullet of marrying into my ex-family, Richard and I had become close. We found we had more in common than just a near-miss disaster. We shared a respect for the work. "I might lose the night, Reggie," he replied, moving a pawn, "but I am coming for your queen." I smiled. It was a genuine smile. My doctor said my blood pressure was down 20 points. I had lost 15 pounds of stress weight. My skin looked clearer. I slept 8 hours a night. It turns out that carrying 3 grown adults on your back is a heavy cardio workout, and putting them down is the best medicine in the world. Then the intercom at the front gate buzzed. It was a harsh electronic sound that cut through the peace of the afternoon. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. Jamal usually called before he came over. I picked up the tablet that controlled the security system. I tapped the screen to view the camera feed from the main gate, which was about 200 yards down the driveway. The image flickered to life. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I didn't recognize them. There were 2 women standing by the iron gates. They looked small on the screen, distorted by the wide-angle lens. One was wearing a faded coat that looked 2 sizes too big. The other was wearing jeans and a hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. They were holding hands. They looked like they had walked a long way. I zoomed in. It was Coretta and Brittany. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching a documentary about people I used to know a long time ago. They looked tired. Coretta's face was gaunt, the cheekbones that used to be highlighted with expensive makeup now sharp and hollow. Brittany looked older, not in a mature way, but in a worn-out way. The shine was gone. The arrogance was gone. Richard looked at me. "Who is it?" I turned the tablet so he could see. He looked at the screen and sighed, a sound of profound pity. "They found you," he said. "I guess they did," I replied. I wondered how. I had bought the property through an LLC. Jamal had buried the paperwork deep. But desperation makes people resourceful. They probably tracked me down through old contacts, or maybe they just got lucky. "Do you want me to call security?" Richard asked, reaching for his phone. "Or the police?" I looked at the screen again. I saw Brittany press the buzzer again. She looked terrified that no one would answer. "No," I said, standing up. "I will handle this." "You don't have to talk to them," Reggie Richards said gently. "You don't owe them a thing." "I know," I said, buttoning my denim jacket, "but I think I need to do this, one last time, to make sure the door is locked tight." I walked down the long gravel driveway. The leaves crunched under my boots. The air was cool, but I felt warm. I walked with a steady rhythm. I wasn't the man who ran to fix their problems anymore. I was the man who owned the land they were standing outside of. As I got closer, I could see them through the black iron bars of the gate. They saw me coming. Coretta straightened up, trying to fix her hair, trying to summon some ghost of her former glamour, but it was useless. The poverty of the last 6 months hung on her like a shroud. Brittany just gripped the bars, her knuckles white. I stopped 5 feet from the gate. I didn't press the button to open it. I stood there looking at them. Reggie Coretta breathed, her voice cracking. "Oh, thank God. We thought maybe you moved away." "Hi, Reggie," Brittany said. Her voice was small, humble. It was the voice she used to use when she wanted money for a school trip. I looked at them. I didn't say hello. I waited. "Reggie, please," Coretta said, tears filling her eyes. "Open the gate. Just for a minute. It is cold out here." We walked from the bus stop. It is 2 miles. I didn't move. "Why are you here?" I asked. My voice was calm, level. "We came to see you," Brittany said. "We came to apologize. We are so sorry." Reggie Coretta sobbed, falling to her knees on the asphalt outside the gate. It wasn't theatrical this time. It was the collapse of a woman who had run out of strength. "We made a mistake," she cried. "A terrible mistake. Darius, he ruined us. He took everything. We were fools, Reggie. I was a fool. I let him get into my head. But I love you. I have always loved you. We had a life together. 20 years. You can't just erase 20 years. Brittany knelt down beside her mother. She put her hands through the bars, reaching toward me. "Dad," she whispered. "Please." "I am sorry I said those things. I was angry. I was confused. Darius isn't my father. You are. You are the one who raised me. You are the one who cared. I miss you. I miss our home. I miss us." They were dirty. They looked hungry. Their clothes were cheap. They were the product of their own choices, and seeing them like this, stripped of all the pretension, should have made me feel vindicated, but it just made me feel tired. "We are working," Coretta said, wiping her face with dirty hands. "We are working at a diner. We live in a basement apartment. It is horrible, Reggie. We have nothing. We learned our lesson. We know the value of $1 now. We know what you did for us. Just give us another chance. Let us come home. We will sign anything. We will do anything. Just don't leave us out here." I looked at them kneeling in the dirt. I looked at the hands reaching through the bars, hands that had swiped my credit cards, hands that had thrown away my picture. I looked back up the driveway toward the house. I saw Richard Sterling standing on the terrace watching. He raised a hand in support. I turned back to them. I reached into my pocket. For a second their eyes lit up. They thought I was reaching for the remote to open the gate, or maybe for my wallet to give them cash. I pulled out a handkerchief. I wiped a smudge of dirt from the gate latch. "You are looking for someone," I said. "Yes," Coretta cried. "We are looking for you, Reggie. We are looking for my husband. We are looking for my dad," Brittany echoed. I shook my head slowly. "You are looking for a man named Reggie," I said. "You are looking for the man who paid the bills. You are looking for the man who fixed the mistakes. You are looking for the man who let you walk all over him because he wanted to be loved." I stepped closer to the bars. I looked deep into Coretta's eyes. I saw the desperation there, but I also saw the calculation. She wasn't missing me. She was missing the safety. "Reggie, the bill payer is dead," I said. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of a tombstone. They froze. "He died 6 months ago," I continued. "He died in a church sanctuary when his wife and daughter stood by and watched a stranger try to destroy him. He died when you told him he was nothing." "Reggie, please," Brittany whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Don't say that. I am not Reggie the bill payer," I said, standing tall. "I am Reginald King. I am a businessman, I am a survivor, and I am a man who has finally learned to value his own peace. I looked at them one last time. I memorized their faces not with love, but with the detachment of a man looking at a photograph of strangers. "And I don't know you people," I said. Coretta gasped as if I had struck her. "Reggie, I don't know you," I repeated. "My family is built on respect. My family is built on loyalty. You are strangers who tried to rob me." I stepped back. "Go back to your lives," I said. "Go back to the work. It will be good for you. It will teach you who you really are. But don't come back here." I turned my back on them. Reggie Coretta screamed. "Reggie, don't you dare walk away!" "Dad," Brittany wailed. I walked up the driveway. I didn't run. I walked with the steady pace of a man who has nowhere to be but exactly where he is. I heard them screaming my name. I heard them rattling the heavy iron gates. I heard the sound of their regret hitting the cold metal bars. But as I walked further away, the sounds faded. The wind in the oak trees swallowed their voices. The distance swallowed their pain. I reached the terrace. Richard was waiting. He had poured me a fresh glass of iced tea. "Everything all right?" he asked. I sat down. I looked at the chessboard. My pieces were in position. My king was safe. "Everything is fine," I said. "Just closing a chapter." I picked up my knight. I looked at the board. I saw the move. I moved the piece. "Checkmate," I said. Richard looked at the board. He smiled and shook his head. "You got me, Reggie. You really got me." I looked down the driveway one last time. The figures at the gate were gone. They had given up. They were walking back to the bus stop, back to the city, back to the life they had earned. I took a deep breath of the clean country air. It tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. I am Reginald King. I am 75 years old, and for the first time in my life I am exactly where I belong. The pen scratched against the heavy bond paper of the legal document, creating a sound that felt more permanent than stone. I was sitting in Jamal's office 3 weeks after the incident at the gate. The mahogany desk between us was covered in files, but the only one that mattered was the one under my hand. It was the document that officially dissolved the King Family Trust, the fund that had been set up to support Coretta and Brittany for the rest of their lives. Jamal looked at me over the rim of his glasses. He held a gold pen in his hand, ready to witness the signature. "Are you sure about this?" Reggie Jamal asked quietly. "This is irreversible. Once you sign this, the assets are reallocated. If you change your mind next year or in 10 years, there is no going back. Brittany gets nothing. Coretta gets nothing. The lineage ends here." I looked at the paper. I looked at the numbers. Millions of dollars. Money earned from double shifts on icy highways. Money earned from missing Christmas mornings to deliver freight. Money that was supposed to build a dynasty. "I am not ending the lineage, Jamal." I said, my voice steady. "I am just changing the blood type." I signed the paper. The ink was black and bold. "Reginald King." I pushed the document across the desk. "It is done," I said. Jamal took the paper. He stamped it. He filed it. "So tell me about the new beneficiaries," he said, leaning back. "The King Foundation. What is the mission statement?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline where my trucks still moved goods, even if I wasn't behind the wheel. "The mission is simple," I said. "We are going to find boys who don't have fathers. Boys who are growing up with a Darius in their lives or no one at all. We are going to find the kids who have grit but no gas in the tank." I turned back to Jamal. "We are going to pay for trade school. We are going to pay for college. We are going to teach them how to drive, how to weld, how to code. But more importantly, we are going to teach them how to be men. We are going to teach them that a man provides, a man protects, and a man never lets anyone mistake his kindness for weakness." Jamal smiled. "A scholarship for character. An investment in integrity." I corrected him. "I spent 20 years investing in a bad stock, Jamal. I poured millions into a company that was bankrupt from the start. Brittany and Coretta, they were a bad investment. They took the capital and they burned it." I tapped the desk. "Now I am diversifying. I am putting my resources into people who will actually build something. I want my legacy to be 1,000 young men who know the value of a hard day's work, not one spoiled girl who thinks the world owes her a living." We launched the foundation a month later. There was no gala. There was no black tie dinner with $5,000 wine. There was just a barbecue at the local community center. I grilled the ribs myself. I wore my apron. I talked to the kids. I met a boy named Marcus. He was 17. He wanted to be a mechanic, but he was working 2 jobs to support his little sister because his dad was in prison. He had grease under his fingernails and a fire in his eyes. I shook his hand. It was rough. It was real. I gave him a scholarship that day. Full ride. When he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "Thank you, Mr. King," I realized something. That one thank you from a stranger meant more to me than 20 years of fake Father's Day cards from Brittany, because he meant it. He understood the value of the gift. I didn't hear from Coretta or Brittany again. The grapevine is a powerful thing, though. I heard they were still at the diner. I heard they moved into a small apartment above a laundromat. I heard Brittany was taking night classes at the community college. Maybe they will make it. Maybe they won't. But for the first time in their lives, they are driving their own truck. They are holding the wheel. And that is the best gift I could have ever given them. The gift of necessity. The sun began to dip below the tree line at my estate, casting long shadows across the lawn. I sat in my rocking chair on the back porch. The air was cooling down. The crickets were starting their evening chorus. I had a glass of sweet tea in my hand. The ice clinked softly against the glass. I was alone. For years I had been terrified of this word. Alone. I thought it meant failure. I thought it meant I was unlovable. I thought I had to buy people to fill the empty chairs at the table. But sitting there watching the sky turn purple and gold, I realized that alone is not the same as lonely. I had peace. I didn't have to wonder if the person smiling at me was calculating my net worth. I didn't have to check my credit card statements for fraud every morning. I didn't have to apologize for who I was or where I came from. I was Reginald King. I was the man who built the roads. I was the man who moved the mountains. I took a sip of tea. It was cold and sweet. I thought about Liam. He had sent me a letter a week ago. He had broken off the engagement completely. He thanked me for opening his eyes. He said his father wanted to have lunch next time I was in the city. I might go. I might not. I didn't need the business. I didn't need the validation. I looked at the empty chair next to me. It was just a chair. It wasn't a hole in my life. It was just a space. And I was okay with the space. I had cut out the tumor. The surgery had been painful. The recovery had been long, but I was cancer-free. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. It sounded like a highway. It sounded like tires on asphalt. It sounded like freedom. We spend our lives planting gardens for people who only bring weeds. I learned that title father isn't just biology, nor is it just providing. It is a sacred contract of mutual respect. When that contract is violated repeatedly, walking away isn't abandonment, it is self-preservation. You cannot buy loyalty, and you certainly cannot teach gratitude to those committed to misunderstanding you. My legacy isn't the ungrateful children I raised, but the peace I finally claimed for myself. A man's dignity is the one asset that must never be negotiated, liquidated, or shared with those who cannot afford to value it. I spent 40 years building an empire, but it took me one Sunday morning to rebuild my self-respect. I realized that being a provider is a trap if the people you provide for view you as a utility rather than a human being. You cannot buy loyalty, and you certainly cannot finance gratitude. Real family isn't determined by who spends your money, but by who values your sacrifice. Walking away from them wasn't an act of cruelty, it was an act of survival. I finally learned that the most expensive thing in the world isn't a luxury car or a mansion, it is your own dignity. And that is one price I will never lower again. If you believe that respect is earned and not owed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, would you have opened the gate for them or would you have walked away just like I did? I'll see you in the next story.